We're live.
Okay, all right, now we're live. Okay, hey everyone. Thank you for coming on. I'm super excited for this conversation. It's a really important conversation, and we have very interesting, amazing guests with us tonight. I'm going to somewhat go over the schedule of tonight's program, I guess you would say, and then we'll just go into it. I tend to do these discussions pretty laid back and just natural. We just do it as it happens. So we have quite a few speakers, and we're breaking them up into like 15, 20 minutes. And at the end, we'll have a questions and a free form section where we can just talk openly, freely, and honestly, as long as we want. I put a set time just to have a set time, but after everyone gets through their scheduled times, we can just talk forever. So, uh, Kelly, do you want to come on really quick? So I want to introduce
Sure.
Kelly. She's our live stream person. Yeah, I feel awkward just like being up here all alone, but
Talking
Kelly
to the camera. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So Kelly is our live stream tech. She'll be in the background, making sure everything's running smoothly. But otherwise, you can just bring everyone up, and
Okay.
then I'll kind of just say hi to everyone, and then we'll just, we'll get started with the speakers.
Okay, great. Here we go.
Oh, everyone's coming on now.
All right.
Are there any? Oh, there's more. Yeah, there's quite a few more that we're waiting on. So. Any more, Kelly? Okay. And
they're not working.
Oh, what's going on?
How do you know?
I can hear it.
Is that it, Kelly?
So before you log in.
Yes, looks like everyone that's here is on the stage now.
Okay, and we can hear your stuff, Marianne.
You can hear my what? I'm so sorry.
I could hear someone talking to you, or maybe that was someone else. But anyway, I just wanted to get everyone's face on here and say hi. So, in that introduction, I didn't even really say what we were talking about. So we are talking about the Equal Rights Amendment tonight. And, everyone on this screen has some sort of special background on it, or they are interested to learn more about it because they have specific topics that they focus on in their own work that can relate. So I just want to, we're just going to head into this. And then, as this goes, I'll be able to add my comments. But we're going to start with Wendy Murphy. Wendy, you can, so Kelly, if you want to just focus on Wendy. And Wendy, just introduce yourself, a brief introduction, and then you can tell us, you can kind of lay down we had last time. You laid down like the foundation, and you kind of bring everyone up to date on what is going on, what it is and why this is important. So go ahead.
Yes, great. Thank you, Katrina, and thank you so much for organizing this, and thanks to everyone for being here. I'm Wendy Murphy. I am an activist, attorney, academic. I'm not even sure that's a real title, but that's a collection of the things that I do. I have been a women's rights attorney for over 37 years. I teach at New England Law Boston. I've been there for 22 years. I teach a seminar on violence against women and law reform. I am also an impact litigator, which means I file cases in state and federal courts around the country, usually to try and reform and change the law on behalf of women's constitutional rights and women's civil rights, including things like Title IX. I've been a litigator and an academic, so I've also published numerous scholarly articles on topics ranging from, rape and the Equal Rights Amendment. I have a piece coming out this month on the history of the Equal Rights Amendment in a peer-reviewed law review journal. It'll be out later this month on the history of women's struggle for equality and the Equal Rights Amendment. So that, by way of background, I will just launch into specifically the history of women's struggle. I'll do a really quick version of it. It's more complicated than I think I'm going to sound, than it's going to sound tonight. But I want to make sure we cover lots of bases. So there'll be time for follow-up questions if I go too quickly over something. And I also have a TED Talk, if you're interested in a TED Talk about the history of women's struggle for equality that's fairly new. If you're interested, just Google Wendy Murphy TED Talk. I only have one. So the struggle for women's equality, most people know, dates back to the beginning of our country in terms of struggle for equality in America. But the worst thing that happened that really cemented women's second-class legal status in America was in 1868 when the 14th Amendment was adopted. I know that sounds funny because we revere the 14th Amendment, but it had a language in there that at first glance looks terrific, looks super democratic and egalitarian. And that language states that all persons shall have equal protection of the laws. Now, you would think that would be good for women because women are certainly persons if you just read the language. But in fact, the Supreme Court of the United States repeatedly refused to recognize women as persons under the law at all, under the 14th Amendment. In fact, women didn't become persons under the Equal Protection Clause until 1971, which most people are shocked to learn and had no idea was the case. Before 1868, women were essentially what we were in England, what our colonizer before our country began. We were the property of men. And to some extent, even after 1868, we remained the property of men because we didn't become persons under the law. Women were angry about that because the 14th Amendment also protected voting rights only for white men. So it did two really bad things to women: equal protection rights for persons, but women weren't persons, and voting rights for white men. The 15th Amendment came along a couple years later and protected voting rights for Black men, but women of all types got nothing out of either the 14th or 15th Amendments, which is why we immediately started fighting for the right to vote and equality. Those were the two things we started fighting for because those were the two things we didn't get in the 14th and 15th Amendments. Most of you know when we first filed a suffrage amendment in the late 1800s, which would give women the right to vote. It took a long time to get it. It took, I forget if the number is 47 or 48 years. It took decades. We didn't actually adopt the 19th Amendment until 1920. It took a long time. And as soon as we were done with winning the right to vote, we immediately turned our attention to the fight for equality. So we win the right to vote in 1920. 3 years later, we filed for the first time with Congress the Equal Rights Amendment. 1923, that amendment stated that men and women shall have equal rights. Now, that is not what the Equal Rights Amendment says today, because that language changed in the 1940s. Mind you, I'm not sure it should have changed. I think it should have said men and women shall have equal rights, because it was only women who didn't get equal rights in 1868. Nevertheless, in 1943, the Equal Rights Amendment was changed to state what it says today, which is equality of rights under the law shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of sex. Changed the word woman to sex, which is fine, and I'll get to that. It was filed in 1923, changed in 1943, but a whole lot of nothing happened between 1943 and the civil rights movement of the 1960s, because neither political party supported women's equality. Women struggled to get either party to do anything with the ERA between the 1940s, when the language was changed, and the early 1960s, when the civil rights movement really started in earnest. And women benefited tremendously from that. Of course, we shouldn't even call it a women's movement, because if you think about it as a civil rights movement and a women's rights movement, it sounds like those are different things. They're not. Nevertheless, what women were fighting for during the civil rights movement was equality. We wanted the ERA. And because the leadership at that time was headed by Alice Paul and the National Woman's Party, which was fiercely nonpartisan because it knew that neither party supported women's equality. It was going full steam ahead and making great progress. And because of Alice Paul and the National Women's Party, we got the ERA passed by Congress finally in 1972. Now, some of you may have been around back then. I was, and women were celebrating. But we weren't done yet, because under Article 5 of the Constitution, an amendment does not become law just because it passes Congress. It then has to be ratified by 3/4 of the states, or 38 states. So it literally went from Congress to the states in 1972 and was moving like wildfire through the states. We quickly got to almost 35 states within a year or two, and then things stopped. Now, why does this matter? Because the support for the ERA faded pretty quickly after it passed Congress. And there are lots of reasons why that happened, but the short answer is both parties actually did not want the ERA to be ratified. Now, how do we know that? Because when the ERA passed Congress in 1972, it was burdened by a 7-year deadline, a 7-year ratification deadline. Prior to 1971, the ERA had no deadline. It was submitted to Congress in 1923 and in 1943 without a deadline. That was important because it took us decades to get the vote. We were not likely to get equality fast either, but it happened. Both parties supported adding a deadline at the last minute. And as soon as that deadline was tacked onto the ERA, it went lickety-split through Congress because both parties knew it would die before the deadline expired, and they were right. In fact, Alice Paul, the head of the National Women's Party, was seen crying in Washington, D.C. the day everyone else was celebrating, and they thought it was tears of joy. It wasn't. She was sobbing because she knew the deadline meant the ERA would never be ratified in time, and she was right. When the deadline came close to expiring, it was extended for almost 3 more years, and then that deadline expired in 1982. In 1982, we had made it to only 35 states, so everybody thought we should give up. It was over. We lost. We have to start over. Then something interesting happened 10 years later. In 1992, the 27th Amendment was ratified, and women were furious because that amendment had been given 203 years to ratify. It had been passed by Congress in 1789. It got 203 years to ratify, and women cried foul. How can you give something as important as equality 10 years to ratify, and you give the timing of congressional pay raises 203 years? I don't think so. Women decided right then and there we were going to go get those other 3 states. We were not going to start over. We would get 3 more states to ratify and then fight in the courts if necessary to argue about why the deadline on the ERA is unconstitutional. It cannot stand. You cannot have such a frivolous constitution that lets some amendments take 2 centuries to ratify and others get only a handful of years. This was our plan back then in 1982. Then in 1992, Then in 2012, things got even better. Why did they get better? Because the United States Archivist, whose job it is to put new amendments in the Constitution after they're ratified by the requisite number of states, the United States Archivist issued a public letter saying, if women get 3 more states to ratify, I will put the Equal Rights Amendment in the Constitution, even though the deadline expired. This is what he put in writing, that the deadline was irrelevant to him because his job is to publish the ERA in the Constitution the minute the last state ratifies. In fact, there's a federal statute right on point. 1 U.S. Code, Section 106B states, the United States Archivist shall forthwith publish new amendments in the Constitution forthwith when the last necessary state ratifies, when the last of 3/4 of the states ratifies. He put that in writing. So women started investing huge amounts of resources and time into getting 3 more states to ratify, and led by Equal Means Equal. You're going to hear from their director, Camila Lopez, in a few minutes. Equal Means Equal headed up a lot of the activism to get Nevada to ratify in 2017, then Illinois in 2018, and last but not least, Virginia ratified in 2020. Being the litigator and anticipating that we were going to have to go to court once we got to 38 states, because none of us thought that everybody would just roll over and let us win the ERA. We knew this was going to be a court battle. So I was already planning the legal action we would need to take. I just didn't know who I was going to sue or what I was going to need to file. And it became clear pretty quickly that when Virginia finally became the last state to ratify in January of 2020, I filed a lawsuit in federal court in Massachusetts against the federal government because the archivist reneged on his promise. He told us he would put it in the Constitution, and then he backed down. And he backed down because then President Trump's Department of Justice issued an opinion letter saying the ERA shouldn't be put into the Constitution because the deadline expired. I sued the national government. I sued the archivist, saying that he had no discretion not to put the ERA in the Constitution. Another lawsuit was filed after mine. I filed on behalf of women as a class of people. Another lawsuit was filed in DC federal court after mine was filed on behalf of the last 3 states to ratify. That was a states' rights lawsuit. Both of our cases were dismissed on procedural grounds, which was unfortunate. But here's the most important thing I want to share with you. When I filed my lawsuit, when the both lawsuits were filed, the Trump administration was in office. He blocked the ERA with that letter from the Department of Justice. His Department of Justice also fought against both lawsuits and argued that the ERA was not valid. Women very much then eagerly voted for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris in 2020. In the 2020 presidential election, both of them said they supported the ERA. So women voted very aggressively for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. And as soon as Joe Biden got into office, we waited for 2 things. One, unblock the ERA, rescind that letter from the Department of Justice, preventing publication of the ERA, and stop fighting against our lawsuits. And guess what happened? Joe Biden kept fighting against me in my lawsuit, argued against me in the First Circuit when I appealed, and adamantly opposed women's equality in his briefs and in oral arguments. And he made exactly the same arguments in his briefs that the Trump Department of Justice had made against me in their briefs before Biden took over. They did exactly the same. DC case argued against the ERA. And to this day, President Biden is blocking the ERA, not only because he hasn't rescinded the Trump administration's block on the ERA, he added his own. So where are we today? We now have this unfortunate moment in time where we have watched both parties very aggressively oppose women's equality in this country without justification, without any legitimate argument beyond technical legal things about deadlines. It's not, equality is more important than the damn deadline. And let me be clear. Many constitutional scholars agree with us that the deadline is not valid. We didn't just make up the argument. Many scholars agree with us. So the question is now, how can any woman in this country vote for either of the major parties' candidates, knowing that neither of them support our right to basic legal equality under the United States Constitution?
Thank you so much, Wendy. I could listen to you talk for hours, and in past talks we really have, but Marianne's time is limited tonight, so I want to switch to Marianne. And like I said, later on, once everyone's had a chance to talk, we'll have time to just, get into it. So thank you so much, Wendy. You are a great voice on this and really an authority. And, I think that everyone is, on board now. So thank you, and we'll switch to Marianne. And I just want to, I'm looking through the comments of some of our viewers. someone said that his or her name, JB, we need another equivalent of the National Women's Party. I agree. And Wendy told me, I should run in a women's party, and I totally would. I've been pretty stubborn about running as an independent. There have been third parties and the major parties who say, you can run with us, we'll put you on our ticket. And I'm like, no, I want to remain an independent, but if there were a National Women's Party, I would actually run for that easily. So so anyway, so we are going to get into our Marianne Williamson portion now. If you want to unmute yourself, Marianne. You're muted.
Thank you very much for having me. I share with you, Katrina. Wendy, I've heard you speak once before, and I agree. It's just mesmerizing. And I think anything I have to say actually isn't as important as what you're saying. So I sort of give back my time if there's anything else that you want to say before I say anything.
Well, Marianne, I had some specific questions for you, actually.
Oh, okay.
But, I mean,
all right.
Yeah,
okay.
But you'll be able to say whatever you want as well.
Katrina,
yeah.
Can I just say one quick thing? I want to acknowledge Marianne for being the first and thus far only presidential candidate who promised that if she wins, she will on day one of her presidency to get the ERA into the Constitution. She promised, and she did it first. And I have so much admiration for you, Marianne. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. I think it bears noting that the reason I said that is because of all of the women, having heard you, of course. I think I heard you in Atlanta. I think if that's possible. I heard you somewhere, but also Nicole Bates here in DC, and also a woman named Jeannie. I can't remember her last name, in New Hampshire, I think, Massachusetts, hounded me until I really got it, just kept pushing and pushing and pushing. And I think it takes that. And I really admire all of you who have made sure that this message gets through. The fact that I have been running for president for a year aligns very deeply with the story that you were telling us here tonight. Because what you made clear is that there's no reason why this thing has not been signed. There's no reason. Something deeper is going on. And what deeper is going on is the ideological as well as financial resistance to women having equal power in this country. A constitutional amendment could abolish slavery, but it could not abolish racism. And in many ways, the abolition of slavery made racism burrow down even deeper. And similarly, they don't burn women at the stake anymore. But the fact that they don't burn us at the stake anymore didn't get rid of the projection onto women that something is wrong with our power. It is such and I've learned in the last year, more than I ever had, how deeply threatening it is to the societal order when women are fully empowered. From the very beginning of our republic, with 56 signers of the Declaration of Independence signing a document, even risking their lives to do so, saying that all men are created equal. 41 of the people who signed were themselves slave owners. So there has always been, it's baked into the cake, this struggle between who we like to think we are and how some of us actually behave. And there have always been, within every generation and within every sector, forces who, for their own ideological and or financial purposes, worked actually against the deeper tenets of democracy. And to me, that's an important context here, that as you were saying, Wendy, this is a civil rights issue. All men are created equal means all human beings are created equal. And when it comes to women's empowerment, you're talking about both an ideological as well as a financial resistance. The financial resistance, we understand, it has to do with chambers of commerce. It has to do with giving women equal pay. All of those things, at least we can rationally understand. The ideological resistance to female empowerment, which is on full display today. In a society, just like in an individual's life, sometimes it's two steps forward, one step back. progress is not always linear. And I think in some ways, I think we almost can't believe some of the things we're fighting about women. And I think many of us realize that this whole issue about reproductive rights, it's more than a war on reproductive rights. It's a war on women. It's a war on women having full agency. It's a war on women saying, I'm going to live the life I want to live, do what I want to do. And when you consider how many of us there are, if women truly live the lives we live, do what we want to do, and stand for what we stand for, I think those who are enemies of this kind of full empowerment probably realize, at least subconsciously, that things would change on such a fundamental level. And so I think that we have, I'm reminded of a line from Martin Luther King when he said, the political desegregation of the American South is the political externalization of the goal of the civil rights movement. He said, but the ultimate goal is the establishment of the beloved community. He recognized that there is an external political aspect to societal change, but also, as he said, qualitative shifts in our souls that are as important as the quantitative changes in our circumstances, he said. So I think we need to realize this. This is not just a legal struggle. It is a recognition of the deep resistance to female power that we have to take on. We have to take that on. And I think taking that on has a lot to do, you were talking before about the 1970s. You said, if we remember 72, I certainly do. I remember Betty Ford. I remember all of that ended up happening. When you actually look back, that was the generation of feminism that I grew up within. And in the 1970s, it was understood that feminism, we could not separate the ultimate goals of feminism from sisterhood. That there was a deep realization, none of us can get there unless all of us get there. And I feel that has, it is devolved. What is devolved is our commitment to sisterhood. This has got to be all of us. This has got to be all of us waking each other up. And when you talk about my saying in my talks that I would call the archivist the first day, and my pointing out, it was because of women who wouldn't leave me alone about this in a good way. And I think that when we realize this and recognize that we're living at such a historic phase transition in human history right now. It's like where the Atlantic meets the Pacific, and obviously there's such turbulence. You look all over the world, you look at violence against women. I mean, some of the violence against women in other countries, it's almost incredible that in the 21st century we're dealing with this. But what I have seen running for president, and I hope that when Jill Stein is on here, I hope this has not been her experience. I hope this will not be her experience. Some of the things towards me in my campaign, I used to joke, what is this, the 16th century? The archetype of witch burning, the way I would be described in a way they would never do about a man. The way something happening in my campaign would be talked about in a way they would never do about a man. The other day, somebody saying she's a narcissist with delusions of grandeur. If I were a man, that would be called confident and ambitious. But some of the things that bothered me most was not only some of the ways I would be trashed and so clearly this demeaning of my womanhood, but the way other women did not speak up. And so I think we need to make, as part of the movement for the Equal Rights Amendment, a deeper conversation about what this will take for all women to realize that this is about something even deeper than the law. That this is something, anytime you have an authoritarian system, and this has been throughout history, one of its biggest targets, this goes all the way back to the burning of the witches, one of its biggest targets is always the destruction of the power of women. Because free-thinking, powerful women tend to raise free-thinking, powerful children who become free-thinking, powerful adults very difficult to control and very difficult to manipulate. So I think that the ERA, it is an equal rights amendment, and it is a message of equality that has something deeper into it. Like you said, I thought the Democrats stood for women. I thought Hillary Clinton was our candidate. I thought I thought Kamala Harris was our vice president. This makes no sense. This makes no sense. And thank you so much, Wendy, for continuing to point that out. This makes no sense. So I'm sure, like I said, I assume when Jill comes, because I run as a Democrat, and even though my name is still on the ballot, and I hope to get more votes in these states where I am still on the ballot, because every vote allows me to remain in the conversation and have leverage. Jill remains, because Jill is a third-party candidate, being a Green Party candidate. It is important, and I am very grateful that those women pushed me as they did, and I see more and more. And I just really thank you, Wendy, because I think those of us who are addressing the issues on the sort of inner planes, I was so shocked during my campaign when I would be trashed so casually and other women did not speak up. I thought, we don't get the sisterhood part anymore. We must revive that. So for those of us who, this idea of sometimes when they talk about the political system and societal transformation, they say we need an inside-outside approach. But we also need an inside-outside approach in the ways that Martin Luther King said we need external changes in our circumstances and internal shifts in our souls. This is a war on women. This is a war on the feminine. This is a war on feminine empowerment. That is what I felt even running. It was an irrational animus towards me. And I knew it because I'm a woman. It's an irrational animus. And for that reason, it is so important that we take this on. And just thank you very much for allowing me to be part of the conversation. And I hope that we can just continue to support one another. As you were doing, Wendy, you give us the facts that we need. We all need the arsenal. We all need the information. And once again, bravo to those women who this one woman, she would show up at practically every event. And I would promise her I would mention the ERA, and then if I didn't, she'd say something. And that's what it takes. So thank you, and thank you for allowing me to be part of the conversation.
Thanks so much, Marianne. I know you have a short amount of time, but someone in there are several people in the comments wondering if you could, well, basically anyone up here, but I am interested in your opinion on the hot topic right now of men and women's spaces, the trans issue. I'll just say my stance on the topic. I am not transphobic, but I truly believe women have a right to their own spaces and their own, sports. And so some people are just wondering if you can comment on that.
I tend to be pretty radical in my belief that people should do what they want to do. So I think that women should be, if a woman says, I want to have my own space, and this is only going to be, I assume you're saying in that, like for biological women, and they would not allow trans women to be part of their space? Is that what you're suggesting?
Well, that's a pretty big argument right now. There are plenty of women who are not, they have voted Democrat their whole lives, and now they're not going to vote for Biden because he's allowing, the trans in women's sports. And
sports, I think, is a different issue, because sports has to do with the issue of a biological imperative. If a girl has been her whole life trying to be a swimmer, let's say, and someone who is a trans girl or a trans woman has a biological ability that supersedes that of the natural born woman, natural born girl, then that is unfair. But I have been told, and I have read, that because of the hormonal changes, that is not necessarily true. There are ways to measure that. There are ways to measure if, in fact, the muscular ability and the hormonal ability is equal. And if the muscular ability and the hormonal ability is such that the trans girl does not have an overriding ability, then I think that the trans girl should be able to compete. But if the trans girl does have an ability that makes it an unfair advantage, then I don't. And it would seem to me that there could be a separate category for the trans girls. Am I wrong on that?
I'll just
Yes,
jump in
please.
and say, obviously, fairness in sports is the overarching rule, regardless of trans. Sports have always emphasized fair play. That's why you can't take drugs and everybody gets tested. I mean, there's just so much about fair play that matters. But the one thing I want to emphasize in terms of why women need their own space, which has nothing to do with being anti-trans, I wrote a brief for the United States Supreme Court in the Bostock case, which is where the Supreme Court said that trans people are entitled to the same civil rights protections under Title VII of the Civil Rights Act as women. That, in other words, that the word sex under Title VII is broad enough to capture LGBTQ and anything else. We don't have to have separate categories. Sex is the umbrella. And I was very proud to write a brief saying, of course, trans people deserve equal rights. There should be no hierarchies of people. It was absurd. And I was really pleased that I could participate in supporting that case. But my feeling about the sex-based space issue is more political than it is biological, although when it comes to women, the political is biological. And it's this: women, just like Black people, Asian people, Jewish people, need political unity, cohesion, and force. And if you make the contours of a political class mushy, you lose power. Women have enough problems being divided by external forces. You can't just be a woman, you have to be a certain subcategory of women. I want women to be women together, whatever their other categories are. I want us to unite. We are 170 million women strong. We have enormous political potential, but we are divided by external forces. So one way to really think about this trans issue is to say, is there something happen to the strong contours of what it means to be female? Because if you tell me I can't have a political space based on sex, you have just degraded my political power. And I will never accept that. I want to bond as a member of a class of people, just like Black people do, just like Asian people do, just like Jewish people do. No one tells Jewish people, Black people, or any other category of people that they're being exclusionary. Because why? We respect their political need to speak as a united voice. We need to give women that same respect. That's my view.
But may I ask you a question about that? First of all, by the way, unfortunately, I don't think that's true about Jewish people at the moment. However, because I think there are a lot of people who are challenging in ways that should not be challenged. However, you're not saying, like when I think of my two girlfriends, for instance, who are trans women, they're women to me. They're women to me.
My
So
doctor
you're
is
not
trans.
saying,
My doctor is trans. I got no problem with it.
yeah, so you're not saying that they would not be included as part of that.
No, they are absolutely under the
Okay,
umbrella of sex.
yeah.
That's why I want them to support the ERA. The ERA uses the word sex as a category, just like Title VII does.
Mhm.
And yet the trans community has been hostile to the ERA, thinking that sex is exclusionary. It isn't. It's the catch-all.
Yeah, it's so important that we make that clear, isn't it? Thank you for mentioning
Exactly.
that. Because to me, it was always just the way I saw it was the opposite, which is this would be great for trans. The ERA is good for trans because it's saying nothing about your sexuality can in any way be used to limit you.
No, and to the contrary, it means that all people are equal. And we
Right.
don't use sex to exclude, we use it to include. But that doesn't mean sex isn't a category. It is a category unto itself. And it recognizes all other categories as equal. This is the beauty of it.
Just in case this is helpful or meaningful in anyone else's experience, I found as a candidate that Americans really respond to the idea that the Declaration of Independence is our vision statement, it's our mission statement, and that our sacred responsibility in every generation is not only to protect its creed, You know, in the Jewish religion, it says every generation must rediscover God for itself. And I think every generation of Americans must take in the meaning of the Declaration of Independence. If it's just inscribed on marble or on parchment, but not in our hearts, it loses its moral force. Our commitment must be not only to protect it against assault from anyone or anything, but also to expand the regions of it. So I see the ERA as not only a dedication to women, but a dedication to an expansion of democracy, an expansion of the very idea, which is the equality of all human beings, that
Yes.
all human beings should have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. If women do not have equal rights, we do not have the equal right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Exactly.
And the Declaration of Independence says not only that they are given by our Creator, but that governments are instituted in order to secure those rights, not diminish those rights, not chip away at those rights, not sabotage those rights, and that if the government is not doing its job, it's the right of the people to alter it or abolish it. So to me, the ERA is a part of the expansion of the franchise of democracy, not only for women, but for trans, for all LGBTQ, et cetera. And I just want to know, I wanted to say in terms of communication, it's been my experience that people really relate to that, and men relate to it, and it gives everybody a sense that the ERA is part of their supporting the ERA is part of how they dedicate themselves to an expansion and a furtherance of democracy itself.
Beautiful.
Thank you so much, Marianne. We have to
Thank
segue
you.
to our next speaker now, but I so appreciate you coming on. Like I said, well, like Wendy said, you know, we've had different discussions, and your name comes up every single time. Women really appreciate that you're, you know, you're outspoken about this. And some women wanted me to ask, would you ever be willing to run with Jill Stein? Would you be willing to team up with Jill Stein?
That's such a
I know, a big question. Well, you know, the idea is it would be great.
It's probably my exit line. It's like, whoa.
Well,
I don't know.
think about it. Think about it,
Yeah.
because
I can
think
tell you
would-
this much,
Okay.
and I think this relates to women as everything else. I will tell you this: whatever political decisions I make in the next 6 months, and I know this is such a conundrum. It's such a conundrum for any thinking, conscious person. I'm as outraged as Wendy is about the fact that Biden hasn't picked up the phone, the fact, you know, all of that. And yet, for me, and I'm just saying this is for me, I'm not saying it to be for anyone else. My main principle is I will not do anything that, in my mind, increases the possibility that Donald Trump will be back in the White House.
Well, I think that if two powerful women were to team up together and they both have strong, you know, followers, that could only maximize your chances of winning. So that's just our, you know, so we don't need an answer. We'll ask
The very fact that we just have the conversation about two women is itself
you know,
cool.
our private comments. Jill is stuck in traffic. I don't know when she's going to arrive, but hopefully it will be soon. And
But imagine if you were the leader of this, Katrina.
Pardon, Wendy?
Two women party, and their primary goal is the ERA. That's it. I'm done. I'm all over that.
Yeah. So
the suffragists, I always say we need to do more than identify the problems in our past. We need to identify with the problem solvers. And I remember when I first saw that movie, Iron Jawed Angels, about Alice Paul, the Hilary Swank and Angelica Houston, and many of them were religious Quakers. So their dedication came from the notion of the inner light that makes all of us equal. Anyway, thank you so much, everyone. God bless. I hope to see you again.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank
and
you.
I love that movie as well. That was such an inspiring movie. But we have to segue to Kamala now. She has a great presentation for us. Bye, Marianne.
Thank you. Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Marianne, you should, oh, bummer. Well, anyway, hi, everybody. I'm Kamala Lopez. I'm president and founder of Equal Means Equal. As Wendy mentioned, we are the organization that Wendy filed those lawsuits for after we had fought on the ground to achieve ratification of the final 3 states, in great part using a film that I made called Equal Means Equal, which I highly recommend you watch. It's on Amazon Prime, and it explains how the ERA helps in a myriad of ways. And I just want to start by saying that equality is not a difficult product to sell per se. 96% of Americans believe that men and women are equal. The problem is that 85+% of those people believe that that equality is already enshrined in our Constitution. So what we are dealing with here in terms of not getting the ERA published is an extreme misinformation, disinformation, and education deficit in the American public at large. So what Equal Means Equal has just embarked upon, and which I would like to invite anybody here tonight and anybody listening to this live stream after it has occurred, is called Final Impact for the ERA. And our goal is to use the power of the people to pressure President Biden to publish the ERA, to make that 3-minute phone call to the archivist, directing them to do their mandatory, non-discretionary duty of publication. And this should not be that hard. So let me show you, if I may, how I think we can do this, and we must do it before November, just quickly to explain why. If the president, who now has the ability to make this 3-minute call and publish ERA, does not do so before November, one of two things happens. Either he wins and we lose the leverage that we have right now, because 9.7 million more women voted than men in the last election. And Biden is not doing very well with women because he's lost us the right to our bodies. He's lost us, he's heading towards losing us contraception, IVF, gay rights, God knows what else. So he really needs the votes of women. And so we have that leverage right now between now and November. The other potential, of course, is that he doesn't win. And I'll leave it there. I'd like to share my screen here. And I'm going to show you our new campaign website. Is it visible to the public?
One moment. Hey, Kelly, do you hear me? Oh, now we're going. Okay, there we are.
It is. Okay, so the ERA, this finalimpact.org website is dedicated 100% to this time-sensitive pressure campaign on President Biden to make the call Joe. That's the hashtag, make the call Joe, publish the ERA. And how are we going to do this? Well, we started by launching a large event in New York City where we worked with a project called, funnily enough, the Inside Out Project. And what that does is leverage community action to do public art in public spaces. And I'm going to show you an example. And I'll actually, so this is you upload your photo here on this page, you submit your portrait, and it prints out in a huge 3-foot by 6-foot poster that you then plaster on public buildings. And so Equal Means Equal is planning to cross through the battleground states, engaging the communities, educating the communities, and getting this out in public spaces. How obviously we can't be in every city in the country. So here is a way that you can do this in your own town. You go to, let me see if I can go to the next page. Okay, so here is the Inside Out Publish the ERA action. And anybody that gathers 50 people in your community who want to be a part of this. You take 50 portraits, 50 people, you submit them, and you create your own action, and the project will help you get it up on the wall and everything you need to do to make sure that it's visible. So it's super important that everybody listening to this create their own community action. We've set up the infrastructure for you to be able to do that, so that when Biden starts to see, he starts to see not only that this is in New York and Los Angeles and Detroit and Reno, but also in Poughkeepsie, in Wichita, in Madison, Wisconsin. This will give him the pressure that he needs, because he has said to us, to people like Jean Sweeney and Nicole Bates, who are on the ERA Publication Task Force that Marianne was repeatedly referring to. He has said that he is not willing to expend the political capital necessary to publish the ERA. So we have to give him the reason to expend that political capital. And because nobody knows even that the ERA exists, let alone that it's ratified and ready, let alone that it's the silver bullet to regain rights that we've lost and move forward to gain more rights, that is the conundrum. So this project is designed to allow all of us to activate in our communities and give pressure to President Biden. And I hope everyone will please do this. We don't have very long. This is the most important next 5 months of our lives. If we succeed in getting President Biden to publish the ERA, all of these things, equal pay. The US government presently discriminates against women and rips them off to the tune of $1.6 trillion a year, which is one of the reasons they're not publishing. We have to get this sorted out. And I really hope you will, listening to this, realize that, just like Marianne just said, it's about a sisterhood and a brotherhood of human beings to see the right thing happen. And we have this very short window of opportunity to make it so. So please, please go to finalimpact.org, upload your picture. We will plaster it on a building for you, and start an action in your community. Because I tell you what, if 1,000 cities have pictures of people holding the phone that say, "Make the call, Joe," he is going to make the call.
Thank you, Kamala. Yeah, I have been trying to start an action in my community, and I just can't get women to get involved. I don't know what the deal is, but I think that if we just, Kelly, can you put Kamala on the screen too? I feel so awkward just being the only one. So Kamala, can I ask you, have you been getting many people submitting photos?
We had a fantastic activation in New York. People were so excited. And I think part of it is just human vanity. It's really exciting to see your face blown up to this huge portrait and then have it glued on a building, and you can bring people over and point at it. So we had hundreds of people participating in New York. And I think that we can get thousands, if not tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people to do this if we make it fun, And one way to do that.
So,
sorry, go ahead.
I don't know if I'm cutting into you. You're cutting out my Wi-Fi.
Oh, I think you got frozen, Katrina. But I think it's really fun. It's something you can do together. You can have an event at your house. And then if you get enough people, the Inside Out Project will bring their van. And I want to show these fabulous pictures, if you don't mind letting me share my screen one more time here.
Yep, that'll be fine.
Let's see. So here, I hope you can see that. But here's an example. So our dear friend Patricia Arquette is crying. Our lead advisor Sanja Natal is shocked. Rosanna, Tazia, Kat. Here's just an example of a big. This is a wall. When you stand next to this, you're tiny. Here, so there are lots of. Let's see. It doesn't show it. So there. Let's see. How do I move from image to image here? Here's another. So here's a big wall, very big wall. See how fun it is? Everybody's face on it. Here's what it looks like on the outside of a building. Here's what it looks like on the roof. It's very moving, very exciting. And you can go to your local city. We're presently working with the city of West Hollywood. We're going to do a big installation at Pride in Los Angeles. But you can go to any city where you are and say, this is a public art exhibit. We'd like to use the library. We'd like to use a private person might let you use their building if it's like a movie theater. And then once you've got that building, the Inside Out project will lead you step by step on how to pull it off, and then leave it up till November and have it say, make the call, Joe. And it'll start people going, the call about what? And then you go, women's equality. And then they go, what do you mean? Women are already equal. And that's what we need. We need those conversations happening everywhere so people understand, no, women are not equal, but they could be. If Biden would make a 3-minute call, they could be.
And can I follow up? Can I follow up with one thing? Because I just want to warn everybody that one of the most common questions we get is, oh, come on, what rights do men have that women do not have? And if that's the question, it's a hard one to answer in a way that explains the nature of women's inequality. Because if you remember earlier, I said women became persons in 1971. But in that decision from the Supreme Court said women are persons, but they're not equal persons. I mean, they were very explicit about it. So what does it mean to be a person but an unequal person? It means this. So if someone says, what rights do men have that women do not have? Your answer is, that's the wrong question. The question is, what rights and laws must, as a constitutional matter, be applied equally to women by the government? The answer to that question is none, zero. No laws are required under the Constitution to be applied equally to women. And this covers the gamut from getting a dog license to freedom of speech to laws against rape and domestic abuse, even laws against slavery. No laws must be applied equally to women. Why? Because the Supreme Court said we were persons, but not equal persons, and that the government may enforce laws differently and worse when applied to women. All laws. So you correct people when they ask you the wrong question, tell them the right question, and then be sure to make it as clear as you can. What I like to say is, if you just keep talking about laws, oh, let's just pass a law that says women have equal pay. We'll just pass a law tomorrow that says give women equal pay. The problem is if she doesn't get equal pay and then she goes to court to complain about it, the judge is allowed to say, well, I don't have to enforce an equal pay law equally because the Constitution doesn't require it. So you run around passing laws and it's like pushing crumbs on a broken plate. They just fall through the cracks. We have to fix the plate first. That's what the ERA does. It fixes the constitutional plate. And nothing matters until we do that. No laws matter ever until we do that.
And if you watch my film, there's so many examples in the area of domestic violence and sexual assault, in particular, horrific cases where a woman has a restraining order. She calls the police department multiple times because her ex has stolen her children, and the police do nothing. and the children are murdered. And she takes it all the way to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court goes, sorry, the police do not have a mandatory duty to respond to that restraining order or to address domestic violence. They get to decide how to, because of precisely what Wendy is saying. So we're not equal. Our laws are not, otherwise we wouldn't see. I mean, the thing is, if you just look at the society at large, you go, why do 99% of rapists not spend one single night in prison? Why is there still this intransigent gender pay gap? Why is there still, Weinstein and Cosby and all of this, and there's no justice? Well, it's precisely because until the ERA is published, it cannot be pointed to in a court of law. Okay, I'm done.
Thank you, Kamala. Yeah, so thank you so much for your presentation. And I really hope that people, if it's too much effort to put on an action in your own community, at least upload a photo and send it to them. I mean, that will take like 5 minutes.
Please
So
upload a photo, finalimpact.org.
Yeah, finalimpact.org. So yes, if everyone could do that, make it a goal to do that by this weekend, that would be easy. That would be a handful of pictures that we could add to this without having to really do much ourselves other than, take a quick selfie. So unfortunately, I haven't heard back from Jill yet. When I heard from her and her team, around when we first started, and she was stuck in a cab in New York or something, and they said she'll join when she can. I haven't gotten an update. So Jill was going to talk now, but since she's not here, we'll just go to Allison, which was our next speaker. Are you okay to go now, Allison?
I'm happy to.
Okay, all right. Well, I appreciate that you, so I just learned about Allison just like a day ago. Marianne's team actually emailed me about her, and I thought that she would be a great addition. Do you want to tell everyone about your nonprofit and then your Faith for ERA, just in general? Just introduce yourself, basically.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I'm Allison McKinney-Tim. I'm the founder and executive director of Justice Revival, a Christian voice for human rights in the United States. Our mission is to inspire, educate, and mobilize people of Christian faith in this country to affirm and defend universal and equal human rights for all of us. So that is what we do. We also convene the Faith for ERA interfaith advocacy campaign in support of the Equal Rights Amendment. And so we are doing the faith organizing and mobilizing within this broader movement. And it's really a privilege to share this platform with so many esteemed speakers. I see fellow activists, colleagues, others whose work I have followed. So I'm grateful to be part of the conversation. And if I may, I'd love to just pick up with something that Marianne Williamson shared and sort of take that as a jumping off point to talk about why I feel it's important to speak from a position of faith in favor of the Equal Rights Amendment. Marianne mentioned there's something deeper going on here. There's ideological resistance to equality, which we know is such a basic democratic value, which should be a given in a modern democracy like ours, and yet it's not. And what I would offer, what I'm actually convinced of, is that at the root of it, this is a theological debate. And it always has been from the very beginning. But that part of the debate has kind of gone underground. And that's made it harder for us to see it and therefore more difficult to respond. So let me explain what I mean. We got this wonderful history that Wendy offered about the struggle for women's rights and sex equality in the United States. And I want to take it back even a little further. Before 1868, that common law system that colonists brought to this country from England that was designed to treat women like children, like wards, like dependents or property of their husbands. The dirty little secret that I'm going to tell on the Christian church, which I am a part of today, the dirty secret is that that awful system was based on lousy theology and bad biblical interpretation that went back at least to the 13th century, a medieval idea about gender that saw women as inferior in every way, morally, spiritually, intellectually. And that to me is shameful. But you see, that bad theology, I do not think is core to the faith that I and so many hold dear. In the same way that the Bible was twisted to support the slaveocracy in this country, we know, but people who suffered under that regime were able still to find a liberating message of justice and love, a message that pointed toward beloved community. And I believe we can do the same when it comes to sex and gender equality. So you see sexism intertwined with racism, the oppression of women intertwined, intersecting with the oppression of Native and African American people. This is all part of the original sin of this country. It's all part of a flawed democracy that only counted a small, select group of people as we the people. And yet we are all human beings. We are all equal in dignity and worth. We are all deserving of full inclusion and equality in this nation. We need the ERA. And as a person of Christian faith, I believe, here's why I believe it's important, in particular, for people of faith to stand up for this. First of all, for those of us in the church, if we know that ugly history, we know that there's something to atone for. We know there's something to tell the truth about, to confess, if you will, and to make amends for. And the way we can make amends for it is by this simple, not easy, not trifling, but simple, straightforward, compelling 24 words that rectify the wrongs of the past, that say we are indeed all equal in dignity and worth. Now, see, as a person of Christian faith, I believe we are called to love our neighbors as ourselves. And I know people of many backgrounds share a similar belief. I believe we're called to serve others sacrificially, even to see the face of God in every woman and man and child, and to view the meaning of their lives in light of eternity. And with that sort of calling to beloved community, it seems to me that granting one another the minimum dignity of equality under the law, this is the very least we can do. Agreeing we should all be free from state-sanctioned discrimination, this is the least we can do. Equal human rights, after all, are a bare minimum, a moral bottom line, and equality is indeed a basic human right, and it is also core to a healthy democracy. And our democracy is sort of right on the ropes right now. And so if we want to do something to shore it up, to strengthen it, to buttress the integrity and health of our democracy, the ERA is the most consequential, the most sweeping reform we can make in that direction. So from a spiritual standpoint, I want to say legal equality is really not a lot to ask for a fellow human being who is a sacred person like oneself. At the end of the day, at Faith for ERA, our core shared value is that all people are equally loved in the sight of their Creator and we should all be equally respected by the United States government. And that is what the Equal Rights Amendment would achieve. As all the folks here gathered, I think, understand very well. So one call to action that I'll leave you with is our interfaith statement of support for the ERA. We have that on our website at justicerevival.org. If you are a faith leader, formal or informal, in any tradition, or if you know faith leaders, share this with them. Call them to sign it and share it. We have hundreds of signatures nationwide. We want to grow that number. We have a dozen faith organizations part of Faith for ERA now. We want to grow that number as well. So please check us out online, check us out on social, and reach out if you or your organization would like to be part also of Faith for ERA.
Can I ask you a question, Allison? Thank you for that very much. Would you be willing to adjust your statement in support of the ERA to something more precise about pressuring whoever wins to publish the ERA? Because, don't take this personally, but we've heard from a large number of people, including Democrats and including Biden and Kamala Harris, who have said exactly the things that people like you say, which is, we support the ERA, we support the ERA. That, as you can well understand at this point, isn't worth very much to us, because it's really easy to say you support the ERA, and I don't mean this about you, don't take this personally, but what we need is action, and that action has to be political pressure on the presidential candidates now to make a promise to publish the ERA. And from Biden in particular, we want publication before November. And I'm personally threatening not to vote for him if he doesn't publish before November. And I don't care who wins. If Trump wins because Biden doesn't support women by publishing the ERA, that's on Biden. That's not on me. I will not vote for any candidate who does not publish the ERA. I don't care what they say they feel about the ERA. So if you can appreciate what I'm saying, would you be willing to transfer what you have now into a more politically salient document at this point in time, at least for the next 6 months, and use it to bring some more pressure to bear on Joe Biden?
Oh, so I appreciate the point. I mean, let me back up and fill you in a little more on our activities so far, because we have been, I think, politically relevant. We've been part of the ERA coalition for a number of years. And if you look at our interfaith statement of support for the ERA, it speaks specifically about relevant legislation, about Congress taking action, about the president ordering the archivist to publish. We also at Justice Revival have advocated directly with the archivist. We have met with members of Congress, and we have engaged for many years in mobilizing our thousands of supporters nationwide in grassroots digital lobbying, and we're doing additional organizing. So we are a 501c3, and the main thrust of our activities, according to our structure, is educational. And so I continue to believe that the cause and the purpose of equality is important to address. But yes, this all connects back to the important political action that we follow closely at our monthly meetings with our ERA coalition partners, and that we're working on day to day here at Justice Revival.
Kelly, I mean, not Kelly, Wendy, the tech engineer, Kelly, just texted me. She said, Wendy means business. And that's why I said, that's why I love her.
Well, I mean, we know that the archivist said, and this is newish, if Biden tells her to publish, she will. So we don't really care about Congress, because Congress doesn't have any authority to do anything about the ERA at this point. Biden's administration has conceded as much in front of the DC Circuit Court of Appeals. The Congress is a distraction because they lack authority to do anything to help with the ERA at this point. So we're really trying to target our energy by just pressuring Biden. You know, it's the only thing that matters, is saying to Biden, you want our vote and you represent a large number of people. a very specific, very serious, we mean it, we mean business. We will not vote for you if you don't get this done before November. That's what Kamala Lopez was just talking about. We have tried lots of different ways to get this to happen. I've filed more lawsuits than I can count, all about the ERA. And thus far, nothing has worked, because the only thing left now is to get Biden to make that phone call. That's all we're doing, because it's the only thing that matters. I'm not going to put you on the spot again, because I heard what you said, but I would appreciate if you could at least, take it back to your board or whoever has to make the decision, and see if you could narrow your focus for the next 6 months, perhaps join in with Equal Means Equal, and just push Biden. Because after November, if we don't get this done by November, it's not going to happen. It just doesn't matter. Your work won't matter.
Well, another way she can push her.
Just to
sorry.
respond briefly,
Yeah,
no,
go ahead.
I understand well what you're saying, and I don't disagree with any of that. So playing hardball with Biden, I mean, I am 1,000% in support of that. No disagreement here. We are your allies in this cause.
Thank you,
Thank you very much.
Yay. Well, what I was going to
one
say
point,
is
though.
another way you can do that is also just really rallying around a candidate who is standing for the ERA. That is another way to pressure Biden, because so that's all I wanted to say. So what I'm trying to say is you can either go directly, pressuring Biden, or you can be direct. I mean, you can pressure him by just really rallying around, the candidates that actually care. So it looks like you're trying to say something, Kamala.
I just want to mention that this Congress, both the Senate and the House, have been using the misinformation that they have some role at this point to virtue signal, to fundraise, and to try and get votes. I was actually arrested at the Senate hearings last year because they were a farce. There is no need for any further congressional action. In fact, the action that they have now going on, which God bless them for doing it, but it basically says the ERA is already ratified and just needs to be published. And now they're going to vote on that. So it's just a distraction. It's a way to look like you care when you don't do the one thing that needs to be done, which is get this president to do his job. It is part of his obligation to see that our laws are faithfully executed, and he is presently failing to do that. So I just feel so frustrated when people talk about Congress and they're going to remove the deadline, or they're going to have a bill about how it's already ratified. It's just what they call strum and drang. It's or in American, it's called bullshit. That's what's a lot of bullshit.
Thank you, Kamala. So, Allison, I just want to get clear on your interfaith statement. Is that only for like priests and pastors? I didn't catch that part.
It's for faith leaders.
Okay, faith leaders.
Say however you define that, because some traditions do not officially ordain women or LGBT people, and we do not want those people to be foreclosed because they are trying to reform their traditions from within. And so we invite people who lead in any capacity, and that might be directing an education program in their congregation. It might be leading an advocacy committee, but whatever leadership role that you play in your faith committee, we'd invite you to sign on and support.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so can you remind everyone the website or how to find that interfaith statement?
It's justicerevival.org/ERA.
Okay. Yeah. So if anyone is a churchgoer or, a faith, they're in a faith community of any kind, I would take them to your leader, and have them sign it, because the more we educate people on it, that's obviously good for our efforts. And before we move to our next speakers, Allison, several people in the comments were talking about the language of religious texts referring to, God and the supreme being as male. And so since you come from a faith background and you're working on the ERA, what do you have to say about that? How can we reach religious people if they are seeing, these images of God as male and women as inferior?
Yeah. That's a really important question. I mean, the Bible, it's not always widely known, but it has a whole variety of images for God. I have a book on my shelf, Mourner, Mother, and Midwife. Those are all images for God. There's language about God wanting to gather us like a mother hen would gather her chicks. And so there's a variety of metaphors. There's a language about Sophia, a spirit of wisdom who was with God from the beginning. And this is all in the Hebrew Bible and the Christian New Testament. In addition, there is fascinating feminist theological scholarship of the last 50 years and a real initiative to develop and cultivate imaginative theological language and images for God. I think what I would say at the end of the day is that there is a divine mystery, and that whatever human language we use for it is an imperfect attempt to reach towards something that does transcend us. And so in humility, we can respect that we don't know everything there is to know. But I could also point back to Genesis 1:27, which talks about both male and female reflecting the image of God. So if we're looking for ways to affirm that the feminine side of our humanity also comes from the divine, we have a lot of resources to do so, both in familiar texts and in more recent feminist interpretations.
Thank you so much, Allison. I really appreciated your passionate, speech on, why you support the ERA from a faith background. And thank you for contributing to this conversation. So I just heard from Jill's person, her manager, and she's still coming. She's just running horribly late. So we're just going to keep going. And so our next portion, so we wanted to focus on Michigan, actually, because it's a swing state. It's very close for these candidates. So we want to, educate people in Michigan about this so that we can, this is all about pressuring the candidates to work harder for us, to take this topic as serious. So I rounded up a few candidates and activists in Michigan, and, they invited their people. So, I believe in the ripple effect. I believe that what we're doing right now is going to make a difference and is making a difference. So I'm going to start with Rita Williams, who is would you consider yourself a prison reform activist? Well, you're a podcaster as well. Why don't you just give us a brief introduction?
Absolutely. And thank you so much for having me here. It's an absolute honor. I was shocked when little old me was invited to participate. So thank you. Thank you for having me. As I said to someone that I love very much recently, that I don't wear many hats. I wear many shoes. So I am not only a podcaster, I'm an investigative journalist. I write at clutchjustice.com. That's my blog, my website, podcast of the same name. But our focus is on restorative justice and human rights. Above all, 100% of people are people. No matter where you are, whether it's in prison, whether it's in jail, whether you are, you're in a political camp, being held against your will, you're still a person that is deserving of rights. And the thing that I see that is the most shocking is the absolute, I don't want to say ignorance, but almost complacency when it comes to women's rights in our country. Over the past 25 years, we have incarcerated more and more women, not just due to, mental health crises or substance abuse issues or the war on drugs, or closing the mental health institutions in the 70s. But we punish poverty, and we don't extend equal rights. And that is something that's very, very near and dear to me, that I would, as Kat knows, I'm very loud. I have a lot to say. And so I'm constantly speaking out for those who can't speak for themselves, or who feel disenfranchised, or are being shot down undeservedly. So that is who I am. And I believe, from whether it's lack of mental health resources, generational trauma, and again, substance abuse, there is no reason that people shouldn't have rights. And if we deny rights to one, we deny rights to all. And that's why ERA is important to me.
Thank you. So I kind of wanted to ask you some questions based on your work. And if you don't have an answer, that's fine. It's just kind of meant to spark conversation. So I don't know in depth, like how engaged or how personal or intimate you are with inmates. But I'm kind of curious if you have any experience or perception on women in the prison system. Do you see, okay, so I'll tell you where I'm coming from. So, women are already kind of an exploited class, but then when you put them in these dark places, these like prisons, psychiatric units, when they're extremely ill in hospitals, that creates even more of an opportunity for exploitation to occur. And so those are the places that I'm really passionate about personally. And this is what led me to the ERA, actually, because, if we don't have women in the Constitution as being protected, officially recognized, that just creates more opportunity for these for exploitation to happen in these very dark places where no one cares and no one is watching. You know what I mean? Because if that happens in broad daylight, what happens in these dark, damp places? So I'm just kind of curious, in your experience, have you seen anything in women's prisons that you think probably aren't happening in men's prisons, regarding their constitutional rights, or just their, anything that, is regarding their dignity? And if not, that's okay. But I'm just curious, from experience, do you have any comment or opinion on that, or perception on that, I guess I should say?
As you know, I have a lot of opinions and a lot of comments. So I am coming at this from a very unique perspective of, not only am I a criminal justice professional, I have a master's in criminal justice, I have multiple certifications. I'm also coming at it from the angle of I am justice impacted. I have multiple people who are, unfortunately very directly connected to the system. Some of my best friends, somebody that I consider my adopted dad. He's very special to me, and he's actually serving in Washington State Penitentiary. So I've seen a lot through prisons in general, but I also see the worst of the worst out of women's prisons. FCI Dublin, it's a federal prison in California. They were considered a rape camp. There were unspoken amount of male officers right up to the warden that were raping women, and it went under the rug for years and years and years, up until recently, up until it became a news story that could no longer be swept under the rug. I myself also I've been arrested, and I can tell you from my experience and the dignity, and well, I'm not going to say dignity, I'm going to say the purposeful indignities that were placed on me in a county jail is inexcusable, and actually violated the Prison Rape Elimination Act, or PREA for short. You are not supposed to put a female inmate, as it were, in a place where she can be looked at. It's considered voyeurism. I was not given a screen. I was put into a drunk tank, and I was not offered any type of screen or anything to prevent male inmates, male officers, from looking in on me using the restroom. I had to carefully time when I went to the bathroom because of it. So there are so many things that I think are purposefully ignored and done just to humiliate, just to take somebody down and bring them a little bit farther when they're already involved in what's going to be the most horrific mental roller coaster that they will ever walk through. Because another really great quote that I hear very often in my work for, prison abolition and reform is the process is the punishment. Even if you make it out and you beat your charges, you don't come out, the same way you went in, because the process is so traumatic. And then when you take into account that women are already, second-class citizens in many situations, it's insult to injury.
Wow. So sorry you went through that, Rita. I mean, that is like a powerful testimony. And I mean, it pretty much aligns with what I have heard from other women. And so I told you I would introduce you to Wendy Murphy. You're already kind of somewhat introduced. So Wendy has written about women in incarceration in the ERA. And so Wendy, I'm just kind of curious if you'll, quickly, what was your premise, or, what are you arguing, with the ERA and, in the specific situation of women incarceration? You're muted. You're muted, Wendy. You're muted.
Sorry. My piece on incarcerated women is focused on incarcerated women who kill their abusers. It's a thought piece more than anything else, because it's an argument in favor of teaching incarcerated women their rights and non-rights as women. I argue in the piece, although there's no data to support this, and it's one of the reasons I'm working with one of my law students to do a survey of incarcerated women to see if we can get some data. But I make the argument that women who kill their abusers do so often out of not so much vengeance as necessity, because the legal system is designed to fail them and is designed to facilitate the violence they endure at the hands of men. And when you realize that you cannot turn to the law for protection, you have no choice but to be violent in your own right as your only option. So I make the argument that if women were informed while incarcerated, be better if it were before they were incarcerated, but if women were educated while in prison to better understand their plight and status as second-class citizens who suffer extra violence in society at the hands of men because of that second-class status, because the laws are not enforced equally on their behalf, including all laws that we know and understand are laws that are supposed to protect women from sex-specific harm like rape, domestic abuse, and stalking, and so forth. If the laws will never protect women adequately because the Constitution doesn't require equal enforcement of them, then by teaching women to understand their status as second-class persons, they might be better able to channel their life situation to move in a more positive way toward perhaps, becoming. Is that me?
I don't know who it is. Let's see. Jill or Kamala, you might have to mute yourselves. Hi, Jill, by the way.
So I'll wrap up quickly so we can get to Jill. My argument is that it would benefit women to be educated about their rights and non-rights as women while incarcerated, where, by the way, they do learn a lot of things, although most prisons teach women skills like, needlepoint or how to change the oil. But I believe people should learn about their rights, and not just their rights and non-rights as second-class persons, but their Fourth Amendment, Fifth Amendment, Sixth Amendment rights, First Amendment rights, all their rights. Because when you become knowledgeable about your rights, including the fact that you may need to work in a positive way toward addressing injustice and structured inequality, perhaps you won't kill in frustration and desperation, because you'll actually have a sense of hope that you can participate in reform and do something productive, rather than kill and end up in prison because you have no hope. So it's a kind of funny paper in the sense that, again, it's a thought piece, and I would be glad to touch base with you. But to me, to me, the funniest thing about writing the paper was that when I went to look for data showing the measurable benefits of educating people about their rights, I found nothing. I found a little thing from Europe, but I found no scientific data, no social science research, nothing. And I'm so distraught about that. I think it goes without saying that people benefit from understanding their rights, but certainly incarcerated people deserve to understand their rights a whole lot better. So I'd be glad to connect with you, be glad to share my paper with you.
Wendy, I think that's a great viewpoint on this. I'm curious if you know of any groups that are working with incarcerated women to educate them on this topic.
Yes, my student, one of my law students here in Boston, runs a nonprofit where that's exactly what she's doing. Not so much around the ERA, but she's more interested in mandamus, Fourth Amendment, Fifth Amendment, Sixth Amendment rights. But when we talked, she absolutely appreciated the importance of incorporating this understanding of the status that landed you there in the first place, and really appreciating the conditions under which women live socially. I mean, in my TED Talk, I call it constitutional terrorism. And as I mentioned before, I have this paper coming out in a peer-reviewed journal later this month where I call it constitutional terrorism. When you live under a regime where you know that there is no law anywhere in your country that must be applied equally to you because you are female, how is that not terroristic? Or as Justice Scalia said, and I think, people forget this, but he made it very clear, thankfully, he said it out loud in 2011, it's not that the Constitution requires sex discrimination, it's that it doesn't prohibit it. And that's the whole problem right there. It doesn't prohibit it, which means all government officials in all branches, state and federal, at all times, have the authority given to them by the Constitution to treat women differently and worse simply because they're female. That's the regime under which women live. That is the regime under which women become incarcerated. And, you don't have to study the very obvious point that any person who is explicitly a second-class citizen is going to suffer disproportionately high rates of all forms of harm.
Thank you, Wendy. So Rita, I think it might be a cool idea on your she has I don't know if you caught on, but she runs a criminal justice podcast, and I don't know, I'm wondering if there's some way we can start working with incarcerated women on this. I mean, I think that's a really cool idea, and even if I don't know if it would be legal to even get them involved with the Equal Means Equal project. I mean, can they have their pictures taken legally? I mean, I don't know, but that's just something to look into.
No, I love that idea, and there's no reason that they can't now. Sadly, what will probably happen is they will be charged to have their picture taken, because prisoners are a commodity. Very sadly, it's very big business. So, but I know a few, and I will start making some calls. I would love to get them involved and have their voices be heard as well.
Awesome. So do you have any comments before I switch to someone else, Rita? And later we'll have time to talk more. We're just trying to get through all our speakers.
Oh, I'm just so glad to be blazing, this trail with all of you. Thank you for having me here.
Thank you for coming on. I appreciate it. So we're going to finish up with our Michigan peeps. So I'm going to go now to our only male of panelists, Salim. How are you today? You're muted, by the way. Okay, you're good. Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you all doing today?
Well, we're good. So if you want to just tell us a little bit about yourself, and I can ask you some questions after that, or if you had something you wanted to, if you had something prepared that you wanted to talk about, but go ahead.
Yeah. So first of all, just thank you so much for having me on here tonight, and bringing this to the forefront for me, Katrina, because I'll be honest, I'm not the most knowledgeable on this topic. So Wendy, the way you opened tonight was very beneficial to me. I was taking plenty of notes to become more informed and more educated on this topic. So I'm running for congressional representative in Michigan's 3rd district. So it's West Michigan, biggest city in our area. would be Grand Rapids. So I am running against Hillary Skolton, someone that I have not seen come out as a supporter of the ERA to pressure President Biden to make that phone call. From what I've been listening and hearing, if I feel like it goes along with things that I support. So I know you said Congress can't do anything more than pressure. So from what I've been hearing and everything, it sounds like it goes along with everything that I stand for as well. So I'd be happy to make a statement saying that I would support pressuring the president to make that phone call. So I'm not sure if there's much else that you want me to talk about personally, but I feel like it's really important for me to just listen and learn more from all of you here tonight. So if you have any questions for me, I'm happy to answer anything.
Thanks so much, Salim. I really appreciate that. And, you know, we had spoken about possibly calling his incumbent opponent and challenging her on her like voicemail or something. Did you decide if you want to do that?
No, I think it's close to 10 o'clock here, so maybe not the best. They're calling this late. So
yeah, they're like, who is this like stalker candidate calling me at like 10 o'clock at night?
Yeah.
Well, we appreciate your support, and you know, I'm not gonna talk politics, but you know, I have looked through your Twitter and you seem to have a really good head on your shoulders. So, you know, I think that you taking on the ERA just does justice to the ERA actually, because, you know, I think that you have a really good stance on other topics. So thank you for, you know, giving this the time and, you know, being willing to, you know, make a public statement. So I don't know, do you have questions for any of our panelists, or do any of the panelists have questions for him?
I personally don't have any questions right now, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay.
So Rita's mic on mute there. So.
Oh yeah. Again, Rita always has something to say. You know, I wanted to know, like, do you need any support in your campaign right now, and how might people be able to help you?
Yeah, so you can find more information about me. VoteSalim.com is the website. Twitter, social media, it's all the same handle. So yeah, I'm trying to keep it as grassroots as possible, just because a big thing with my campaign is actually banning the super PACs and seeing those campaign finance reform laws. I'm not willing to take any money from even PACs, much less super PACs. I'm doing this completely self-funded and wanting to keep it as grassroots as possible. I'm not sure how different it is by state here, but for us in Michigan, we had to go around, and minimum is you have to submit 1,000 signatures in order to make the ballot. Max is 2,000. I have a list of about 20 volunteers that have been wanting to go around and help, but the big thing for me was wanting to get out there myself and get, I ended up submitting 1,200 by myself, but just to hear people's voices, what their concerns are and everything. So again, Katrina, thanks for finding me and connecting me on this, because as a male, I'm 31. Finding a topic to connect with women was something I was kind of missing. So the ERA definitely fits right up there for me. So
yes, and it covers a myriad of issues that are important to women as well. You know, it's kind of like the umbrella that covers it all. So yeah, I actually Kelly, our tech engineer, she told me about you, because I think she had invited you to something that she does. So well, thank you again. Tell us your website again and how to find you on social media.
Yep. So website is votesalim.com. It's vote and then SALIM. You can see it in the bottom left corner there. And then Twitter is also Vote Salim, and then Instagram is also Vote Salim as well. So yeah, feel free to reach out.
Thanks so much, Salim. We're gonna head to our other Michigan candidate now, Jody Decker. Hey, Jody, how are you?
Getting unmuted.
Yeah. So
Okay.
Jody came on. She tried to get on this live stream like an hour and a half beforehand, saying, you locked me out. I can't get in. It's like, yeah, you're way too early. She thought she was coming in late. So if you'd like to just introduce yourself and, you know, what position you're running for and what district, that would be great.
I'm Jody Decker. I'm running for state representative, District 107, which is way up in the UP, Chippewa County, Mackinac County, and then below the bridge, Emmett County, Charlevoix County, and a little bit of Sheboygan County.
Thank
So I'm
you.
right
So,
in the Mackinac Bridge corridor.
so when I first started talking to you, I mean, you didn't really know much about the ERA and didn't know if your district would even necessarily be interested. After hearing all of our panelists today, do you kind of have the same viewpoint on that, or has that changed? Like, what is your understanding of the ERA, and like, do you have a personal connection to it?
Actually, it hasn't been talked about ever that I can remember about, and I've lived in the UP my entire life, and I thought that was just a done deal, already done. So I was kind of surprised to find out that it wasn't. I am a social worker though, so I deal with a lot of domestic violence victims, and I do family preservation. So I deal with foster kids, a lot of trauma, traumatized women, traumatized children. And my degree is also criminal justice. So, and I've worked inside of a male prison. We've only got one female prison in Michigan. So, I've never been to that, but I've had clients that had been inside the prison. They do get raped by the prison guard, the officers, sometimes, but that also happens in the male prisons. One of my platforms is criminal justice reform, because I think we've got entirely too many people locked up for things that aren't even illegal anymore. And foster care reform is my other platform, because I've been a foster parent and I do family preservation now. But yeah, so, and I've also got background with the LGBTQIA community. I used to run a club and we did drag shows. So I know, for being a small town, we actually have a large LGBTQ community here. And I'm right by Canada, so they come across also. So yeah, I'm interested in equality for everybody.
So I'm curious if you had any questions for any of our panelists, or, I don't know, is this something that you think you would be taking on in your campaign, or, because we didn't really talk about that. It was just like, are
I'll
you
send in a
interested
photo. Make the call,
Okay.
Joe. Yeah, for sure. I was taking notes as Wendy was talking, because yeah, she was full of information. But no, I didn't have any specific questions. If anybody's got questions for me, I can answer.
Okay. Well, Wendy, I'm kind of curious how passing the ERA might help, some of these social work conditions that she was talking about. I mean, I know that, I think maybe that's too broad of a question, but I mean, I'm just kind of curious if you have any comment on, some of the issues that she's really passionate about and how the ERA can tie into it.
Yeah, it is a big question. But, because it's a constitutional change, it is the equivalent of rising the tide for all things on behalf of these people who needed the tide to be raised. And that means it covers everything. It affects everything. And I don't want to repeat what I said before, but when the Constitution permits the government to treat a whole class of people unequally, that means everything the government does, not just laws being written and how they're written. For example, hate crime laws often exclude women. Categorically, women are excluded from hate crime protection in Massachusetts. That would be illegal if women were equal under the Constitution, but it's actually legal to exclude women when women aren't entitled to equal treatment under the law. So how a law is written can be problematic, and overnight, that would be fixed if we had the ERA in place. How laws are enforced. Right now, it is legal for police and prosecutors to disproportionately ignore violence against women. Why? because you can't hold them accountable for discrimination in their jobs. If they discriminate against women by not enforcing laws that are supposed to protect them from harm, you can't hold them accountable. You can't go to court. You can't sue them for sex discrimination. I mean, you can, but there's a window within which they're allowed to discriminate. So you can't, in the sense that if they're within that window, it's legal. So enforcement. And so it's not just the written law, which the legislative branch does. It's the enforcement of laws, which is the executive branch, and it's even the judicial branch. If we know nothing else at this point about the Dobbs decision, which overturned Roe versus Wade, it's that if women had equality, if the ERA were in the Constitution when Dobbs came down, the court couldn't have done what it did. I mean, but the Supreme Court is allowed to discriminate against women because, as Justice Scalia said, it's not prohibited. I mean, it's really that broad sweeping. So just in terms of this basic question of, well, what in social justice circles might change overnight, I'll give you a quick example. Women in every state in this country suffer discrimination based on sex in family court. And there are, I've written a brief on this issue. Research shows every single state in this country, in terms of the courts, and the family courts in particular, but even all the other courts as well, are biased against women. Every single state has a study that proves this. And family court, it's particularly bad because of the hyper sex distinctions between the parties that are typically the parties in a family court case, he versus she, wife versus husband, and so on. So this discrimination becomes exacerbated in family court because of the sex of the parties, whereas it's a little bit more watered down in civil cases and criminal cases where the sex differences aren't so stark. But overnight, that would change because it would become illegal to discriminate. And I sort of, to make it very visual, here's equality, here's women. That space between my hands is where violence against women happens with impunity. And it's where all the other discrimination happens with impunity because it's allowed. So every single form of social justice where a woman is suffering, and whether it's incarceration, loss of children in family court, not getting enough appropriate medical care, the medical community isn't studying the diseases women suffer. I mean, every single thing you can think of is worse. Equal pay, pregnancy discrimination, it's all worse because of the constitutional permission that we give every sphere of society when there's something happening that affects people. It's allowed to, everyone's allowed to mistreat women. I mean, I don't know how else to put it. It doesn't mean women are always mistreated. There are certainly places where women are, and times when women are treated perfectly, equally. That's not the issue. It's that it's constitutionally permissible not to treat them equally. So it becomes a systemic problem in all spheres, all institutions, at all times, all branches of government, and so forth. And of course, then it trickles down to us as human beings. Even non-governmental actors learn to mistreat women because it's the way the government does it. It's the way it is. It's not just our culture. We can't just fix our culture, because the culture is the product of our laws and vice versa. So, overnight things would change with the ERA in place because that gap would close. And frankly, to be very blunt about it, even though law is not the fix for everything, it would become less legal. It would become more illegal to harm women, which means there would be liability exposure. And that's when things change, because insurance companies get involved, right? If you can sue for the maltreatment, the insurance companies make sure that the maltreatment stops because they want to keep their money. So there's just a sort of a big piece of it that's just money. It's almost always about money, but in this case, it's about money being made from inequality, and making it expensive to treat women unequally is part of what the ERA would do. But I want to emphasize one thing that I think Katrina made a reference to that we have to acknowledge tonight, and that is that an enormous amount of money is being made on the backs of women, literally and figuratively, in the porn and sex trafficking industries, And I'm talking about billions and billions and billions of dollars. And those profits would suffer if the ERA were published in the Constitution. I don't want to say ratified, it's already ratified, but if it were published in the Constitution, those profit margins would suffer. And that's a good thing. I don't think anybody would argue with the fact that those industries benefit from women being second-class persons, because we can't take effective legal steps to stop those exploitation industries. They can make more money from doing more harm because of that gap. And if we close the gap, they can't make as much money. Well, they also lobby and have enormous impact, lobbying in all states and at all levels, and they have enormous effect in all branches of government. They typically lobby as big tech, which I think is the #2 lobby right now in DC, but they lobby as big tech. They don't lobby as big porn, and they certainly don't lobby as sex trafficking. But we have to acknowledge that that really is the reason neither of the major political parties supports the Equal Rights Amendment. It's that they're being funded not to. And, it's the elephant in the room that we have to acknowledge.
Thanks so much, Wendy. Before I wanted to switch over, I wanted to ask you a question that we got from one of the comments, because it's Michigan specific. It's actually from Rethinking Eve, Jean Sweeney. She wrote, Michigan has no state ERA, so women don't have any equality on a state level. And with publication of the ERA blocked by Democrats, women's equality is not lifted. So I'm just kind of curious. So from her comment, it sounds like states have ERAs, and then there's a federal ERA.
They do.
I don't know much about it. So can you just?
Yep, I'll give you a quick answer. The federal ERA would be in the United States Constitution, the federal government's constitution that covers all of us, and the federal Constitution sets a baseline beneath which the states cannot go in terms of rights and legal protections. But every state has its own constitution within which it can give people more rights. It can't give people weaker rights, but it can give people better rights than what the federal government gives. And so not every state has a state ERA, but many do. Others don't have the language of an ERA per se that says, women, there shall be no discrimination against women. They might have something that just says all people are equal. Some have anti-discrimination provisions that include categories, but not women. So there's different language in different constitutions, but let's just talk generally about the states having an ERA. Let's assume for the sake of argument that every state had a state constitution with a state ERA that mimicked the language of the federal ERA. Let's just assume that for the sake of this point. Even with a state constitutional ERA on the books, the state courts would be free to interpret the state ERA to give women second-class equal rights. Figure that one out. Second-class protections under that state ERA, because there's no federal ERA requiring them to interpret their state ERA to give women fully equal rights. Now, is your head spinning yet? Women can actually have equal rights, even under state constitutions, because the courts in those states that have state ERAs are free to apply them and enforce them in a way that gives women only second-class treatment and second-class protections. And that is, in fact, the law in many states like Utah. If you read the Utah Constitution, it says that women are equal persons under the law. Now, you'd think equal would mean equal, but the Utah courts over time have interpreted that language to mean that women do not have equality and that discrimination against them is reviewed in the courts under a much weaker standard. So there's this big gap in Utah, despite the plain language of the Utah ERA. That would be illegal in Utah with the federal ERA in place. The federal ERA would close the gaps even on the state ERAs, and many of them do have gaps today. Not all of them do, but some do.
So before we switch, I just want to ask another question. I just want to leave our Michigan people with some, just some meat. I'm curious, would it be beneficial at all to even work on the state ERA, or just, obviously we need to just put all our efforts toward a federal ERA, but is there a way, would it be profitable at all to educate Michiganers or Michiganites or whatever the hell they're called about state versus federal, or just work totally towards federal?
Michiganians. Well, that's a really important question. When we were fighting for suffrage, there was a similar schism among women, with some organizations saying, let's just get voting rights state by state. We don't need national voting rights. And of course, Alice Paul and the Women's Party said, the hell with you, we need national voting rights, because national voting rights protections would, affect the states' rights as well. There was a schism. It caused a lot of trouble, and it was responsible for a lot of the delay in getting the national suffrage amendment done. So I'm never going to support too much energy going towards state ERAs, especially where what I just said is the problem, right? It doesn't matter that you get, well, you can spend 10 years in lots of money lobbying and getting a state ERA, and it's not only worth nothing, it actually causes harm, because it's sort of a Band-Aid. It covers up the problem, creates second-class rights for women, but you thought you won. So you don't even, you don't even experience the right emotion about it. So I have a problem with that. And I have a problem, frankly, with a lot of the abortion lawsuits that are going on right now in some of the states, because some of the organizations like Planned Parenthood, the Center for Reproductive Rights, and the ACLU, they are suing under state constitutions, in many instances under state ERAs, but asking the courts to enforce their ERAs under second-class legal standards. So yes, they're challenging abortion restrictions, but they're doing it under second-class standards. They're literally asking the courts to create a second-class place for women while overturning an abortion restriction. And I've been intervening in those cases, saying that's malpractice against me. I'm a woman. You're violating my rights by asking a court to create second-class status for me in that state. I object. And, I'm really pissing a lot of people off by doing that, but I'm doing it because who the hell goes to court and asks for second-class status? I mean, who does that? You might not win if you ask for equal status, but you have to ask. You might lose, but you have to ask, or you can't win. So the bottom line is, I wouldn't at this time waste any energy trying to get a state ERA in Michigan. They're trying to do it in New York right now. I've said the same thing to people there. Don't waste your time. Why? Because we have this 6-month moment in time where we have the possibility of getting the national ERA in the Constitution by publication. All we have to do is get Joe Biden to call the archivist. The archivist has already said, if he calls me, I will publish. So this is a small ask, right? We've got a window of time where we have political power, because he wants the women's vote. And what I can say about Michigan that matters probably more than anything else is that RFK Jr. is doing very well. He's polling very well in Michigan. He's, I think, 24, 26%. Biden could easily lose Michigan because of RFK Jr. Biden needs the women's vote in Michigan. If Biden gets the sense that we're not going to vote for him in Michigan because he's blocking the ERA, he refuses to pick up the damn phone and call the archivist and say, do your job. If he doesn't do that between now and November, he will lose Michigan. That means he loses the election. That's an enormous amount of power for people in Michigan to have right now. So I would center my energy in Michigan with Michiganians, not so much on trying to fight for a state ERA, but target all your energy toward pressuring Biden with the tagline, if you don't do this, we will make sure you lose. And you're already at the cusp of losing because RFK Jr. has so much popularity here. The Democrats know this. So we can focus even just on Michigan and get the ERA in the Constitution, because that's how desperate Biden is to win Michigan. And it's a close enough call where we could make a difference with a very small number of people. So that's my Michigan pitch.
Thank you, Wendy. So before I switch to Jill, I just want to ask Jody if you had any closing comments. I really appreciate that you came on and shared your time with us.
No, I'm just glad to be here and to learn more. I do know that Jill Biden is going to be here tomorrow, and Joe Biden is supposed to be in Detroit on Friday, I believe. So
you get on him, Jody.
I've been trying to get on them for some other issues that we have here, but line 5 being one.
All right. Well, if anyone's in Jody's district, please look her up. She's votejodydecker.com, and I know she's on Twitter. I don't know if she's on any other platform.
On all of them.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much. So, Jill, you had an adventure getting on. It sounds like you're muted. Unmute yourself.
Great.
Thank you so much for coming on. So sorry that you had some troubles getting here, but you missed out on a lot of great topics. You know, Marianne was here earlier, and, you know, a few people had to hop off, but thank you so much for still, you know, committing to come. I thought you weren't going to show up at all, but thank you. You know, this means a lot to many people, many women. And so I think most of us know who you are, but if you just want to give, you know, your own brief introduction, and then we'll just get started.
Sounds great. And I've been stuck in a taxi cab. I was stuck in a cab coming in from Penn Station here in New York City. And I was stuck in a cab, but I was able to intermittently get online. So I did hear quite a bit of Marianne's remarks, which were fascinating. I heard Allison, McKinney, Tim. I heard just a few of Wendy Murphy's introduction, which was fascinating. And yeah, no, I've learned a lot, even just kind of diving in and out. And I will definitely listen to the YouTube posting and really appreciate this conversation. And I'm a presidential candidate. I'm close to being now the presumptive Green Party nominee for president, as the primaries have taken place in many of our states now. I almost have the required number. I'm winning about 90% of the delegates. So I'm very close to being the presumptive nominee. And, you know, I have run before. I'm a medical doctor by profession and practice and training. And I describe myself really as a mother on fire, committed to creating a livable world for our children and our communities. And I moved quickly from clinical medicine, which was my background, to political medicine, which I quickly learned is the mother of all illnesses. And if we're going to fix what's literally killing us, we need to fix our very corrupt and toxic, sick political system. And I've been very much involved in that process while being an advocate on a whole, you know, variety of social, economic, and racial justice issues for decades. I've also been fighting to create a political system that actually allows us to reform the process and to create a livable world for ourselves and our children. And, you know, like many others, I'm just seeing us continue to go in the wrong direction under the hegemony of the parties of war and Wall Street, where, you know, we have the best democracy that money can buy, which is essentially no democracy at all. And the way that women's rights have been treated is certainly an example of that. You know, we started at a disadvantage, being neglected in the Constitution, as Wendy has emphasized so well tonight. You know, women, as well as African Americans and Indigenous Americans, you know, just don't exist as far as the Constitution is concerned. Of course, the original Constitution, and still women have not been kind of brought into the matter as we are as women in many constitutional democracies now. So we have quite a gap to fill. And it's been, you know, very interesting to hear how the lack of a constitutional framework disadvantages all the laws that we have. I was not aware that that's the case, that our laws really cannot be enforced without the constitutional framework. And I should, just one other word about a background, that our campaign is on the ballot now. We have basically 75% of the work done. The way our political system works is that you have to be a part of the parties of oligarchy and empire if you're part of that duopoly, you're automatically on the ballot with very few signatures. And if not, you have a huge hurdle, even at a time when the American people are crying bloody murder, basically, at these two zombie candidates who are being rammed down our throats right now. There's enormous opposition to that and enormous demand for other choices that reflect, our urgently felt need to address the many crises that we face really in virtually every dimension of our lives, both that women face because we are women, we are a disadvantaged group. So the other social and economic biases impact us enormously in the same way that people of color are more disadvantaged by the various, economic inequalities that are really, extremely, intensive these days and getting worse by and large. In a society where we spend half of our congressional budget on endless wars, now with a genocidal war in full view going on with our tax dollars and with the full support of Congress and, with very few opponents, both Congress and the president. And of course, war is a big issue for women. And, not to leave this important issue aside, we're seeing an example of that in Gaza, where 37 children are deprived every day of their mothers, and this has been going on now for 6-7 months. So, it's really disastrous what's taking place with our tax dollars. Its impact on women are incredible, including the starvation right now of, the entire population, which has been food and water and medicines and all supplies have been totally choked off in the past week with the assault going on in Rafah and the seizure of that passage by the Israeli occupation forces. All supplies have been shut down, and so many women, are cannot nurse their children. So if they are giving birth, their babies are dying at the breast. And, war is a terrible thing for women and families and children. And we are seeing that very much in front of our eyes. So I just, I want to sort of place us in the big picture right now, where we are in a state of empire, a U.S. empire that thinks it is still the dominant force in the world when we're not. And we've had a series of catastrophic wars, actually going back all the way to the war in Vietnam, a series of murderous catastrophic wars, which are enormously costly to us as the American people. We are funding these wars and this endless war machine. It's enormously costly to our stature around the globe. And these wars also, are invariably driving towards potential nuclear confrontation. And there are 3 fronts for nuclear engagement right now, which are actually terrifying and have reason really to give everyone concern, because no nuclear war is over there. They all have the potential to go to nuclear winter. So just to make the point that women are very much in the target hairs right now of this kind of global instability, which also, comes home to hurt us in a very big way, because by funding these endless wars, we are not funding what women and children and families and communities need here. As Martin Luther King said, we need to be that beloved community, but in fact, we are the opposite of that right now, as in his words as well, that my country is the greatest purveyor of violence that the world has ever known. Women are inherently intersectional. Women are inherently, create that village without which there are no children. There is no future. There is no kind of organic society. Women are, have an inherent kind of knowledge and skill set, which is really fundamental for all of this. And to that extent, standing up for the ERA is absolutely critical our campaign thought we had sent the paperwork to you months ago, and that may be that it fell through the cracks and we didn't get it to you. But we were tweeting about this back in March, and it is actually the first bullet point in our agenda for women in our platform now, which is up on our website. So we are very much in support. We see, we see the ERA as really a stand against patriarchy, which in my view is inseparable from empire, colonialism, and this just incredibly this state of massive inequality that really characterizes our society right now. So that by way of introduction. Oh, and the final comment I should make is that we are the one campaign which is on track now to be on the ballot, which is, pro-worker, anti-war, anti-genocide, climate emergency, and very much pro-women and pro-ERA.
Thank you so much, Jill. First off, I wanted to say congratulations on almost reaching the nomination for the Green Party. I thought you already were the nominee for the Green Party, so I think it's basically a done deal. Yeah. But I appreciated everything you said. It was very inspiring. I also come from an anti-war background as well, and I see publishing the ERA as kind of righting a fundamental injustice that allows more injustices to occur, because this is kind of like one of the most basic injustices of all time, really. And I'm very passionate about ending sexual violence, but especially in war. We hear the numbers of deaths in war, we hear the money spent, but we don't hear about the rapes that are happening to the women and children. So it's just something that makes me sick. And I feel like the US has an obligation to publish the ERA, not only for women here, but for women globally. Yes. Because it's like, our country stands for women's rights. So, so maybe, I don't know, will we end, child brides in other countries and, all this sexual femicide in different countries, but we need to make that stance. I think it's so important as so I'm a candidate as well. I'm a US House candidate, and I'm a very anti-war candidate as well. And I just feel like I can't be an anti-war candidate without also being like a pro-woman candidate, And so I'm really glad that you made that distinction and that, you connected those two. And so I don't know if you caught the part earlier. I asked Marianne Williamson if she would ever, well, I didn't ask. There were several people, well, I kind of, but a group of us are kind of interested if you guys would run together, or you girls would you consider running together? What do you think? To double your chances of winning.
Yeah, no, I strongly believe in collaborations. There would be some party issues to get figured out there because you have to be in one party. Yes. And so, I'd say, depending on Marianne's mindset, how dedicated she still is to the Democratic Party, but I would love to have a conversation about that. As far as I'm concerned, collaboration is the name. It's the name of the game.
Yeah, well, when you were talking, I think you even quoted the same person, she quoted the same, so it's just like, this would be so right, it just seems right. But so I had a few people wanted me to ask you a few questions regarding the ERA. And one is, so there's, the corporate backed candidates right now, from what I understand, what I've been told is they are actively working to keep the ERA squashed, and so some feminist groups out here, they're really wanting a candidate who can, be a little more vocal on it. And it sounds like you have no problem with that. I know you've been pretty busy with some of your anti-war efforts though, but would you be willing to be more, active with the ERA? Because if so, I know that you're struggling in New York right now with ballot access. Let's get people, round up helping you, and
Yeah.
I don't know if you caught Wendy's talk earlier, but, she was saying how, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, they were all for the ERA before they got elected. And then when they got elected, they just kind of forgot about it. I don't get the sense you would do that. I mean, I don't know, but so what are your thoughts on, because it's like Wendy was saying earlier, and, she was referencing something I said too, there's so much profit that's happening off of exploiting women. So, these corporate backed candidates who are being funded by the people exploiting the women, of course they don't want the ERA passed. So, we really need to, I don't know, what is the strategy to break that apart? I guess just being more, vocal about it. What are your thoughts?
I mean, my sense is that nobody knows, nobody knows that the ERA is being obstructed, and, that there's profiteering around that. And I mean, the ERA, to my mind, it's such a no-brainer. It's like, why hasn't it been released already? Why hasn't it been enacted? And why would women's rights be denied at a time when there's such a push for recognizing equality and justice broadly? So I don't see a problem advocating for it or convincing people. In my experience, it's as simple as pointing out that it's being obstructed and that it's in the hands of the archivist, and the president simply has to make that call. To my mind, this is like an absolute no-brainer. It's on our list of, what happens on day one. There's every reason to do it and no reason not to do it. It's not like we're getting support from, people who are exploiting women, low wages, or, women as, sort of tipped workers, which have a lot of women in that category who are, basically don't have a minimum wage whatsoever, a minimum wage of like $2.60. I don't see, we are not dependent on corporate sponsors. We don't accept corporate PAC money. We don't run with a super PAC. We don't use the legal loopholes that Democrats use so that a single donor can write a check for a Biden victory fund or a Trump victory fund for $600,000, and it basically gets laundered back to the presidential campaign. We don't do any of that stuff. We're a very clean money, small donor, regular campaign. Let's see, why did I just lose? Okay, I think you're back. I lost you for a second. Yeah, so no, there's every reason for us to do it, and I don't see it being a problem whatsoever.
Can I say one quick thing, or can I ask you a quick follow-up question to that, Jill?
Sure.
I saw, because I'm so tech illiterate, I just tweet as if anybody cares what I'm saying. And I recall seeing your campaign talking about the ERA. I was so delighted. But I kind of barked at the guy and I said, what is this? You say you support the ERA. Everybody says they support the ERA. Nobody doesn't support the ERA. No candidate for dog catcher would say, I don't support the ERA. It's an absurd thing that anyone would say, I don't support the ERA. So, and because we got burned with Biden and Harris, we're particularly sensitive about the language that we get. So I think what Katrina's trying to get at, and what I really would like to hone in on, is whether your new language, and maybe it is new, I hope it is precise. Not just that you support the ERA, that on day one of your presidency, you will make that phone call, because that's the thing that Biden won't say. And it's also, as you said, it's a no-brainer to make the promise, because why wouldn't you? Because what the hell, right? It's such a simple thing to do. But if you do start saying it, not just saying I support the ERA, but in your platform, and then when you're on the stump, if you say, I want to make clear this is important to me, There are 170 million women voters in this country. They don't have equality. I think that's sick. That's anti-democratic. And I want every one of them to know that on day one, I will call the archivist and make her do her damn job and put the ERA in the Constitution. If you start saying that, then regardless of who wins, people learn. And that is everything to us. Even if it doesn't pressure Biden to do the right thing, and I think it will help actually, education is everything on this issue. It's just, it's the most important thing. And I think you have the people you're speaking to care, but don't know.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that language is in our platform right now, that we will publish the ERA, and it may need to add day one, but that's such an obvious, easy, simple thing to do. Yeah, I mean, I would say consider it done for sure.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
So I'm curious, Jill, would it be helpful if we put together like monthly ERA live streams so that we could start educating more people? I mean, would that be helpful at all? I mean, would you be interested in that? I mean, would that be helpful for your campaign?
For sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, no, it
Because
absolutely.
we've been doing, I mean, we've only done a few, but I mean, I have no problem putting these together. And, you know, it's just like, why not just keep expanding our reach? And, you know, if you're willing to, you know, join us monthly, you know, we'll see if Marianne wants to as well. It seems like she wanted to continue the conversation, but she said something really interesting earlier about how this is, yes, it's a legal issue, but we also have somewhat of a cultural issue where we don't have community together anymore. So I think this is also an important activity to do, where we're coming together around a common good cause. I mean, I know it's happening in other areas too, but you know, it's just kind of different in this regard. So
Yeah, no, I think the more we can get the word out and like let people know that the ERA just kind of got waylaid, you know. So many of us thought it was coming and it was such a no-brainer and it was so close for so long, you know. I think people just assumed that of course it got enacted. So just letting people know that it's like it's within a hair of being enacted, but it's now being obstructed. So, you know, and the difference that will make in our lives in terms of ensuring, you know, all the rights that we think we have, we don't actually have. And then there are lots of rights that we don't have, you know, and for, you know, women to be reassured that we have a right to health care, you know, and to equal health care and to reproductive health care, you know, will be huge and really resonate with some of the issues that are really on fire right now.
okay, well, I'm kind of speechless at this point. It's been a long night, but I'm curious if anyone here present has any questions, or I'll start looking through the comments. So, well, first off, I'll say, people in the audience, viewers, if you have questions for Jill or any of the other candidates, start writing them down. If you want to come onto the live stream with us, contact, well, I don't know how to work this, but we can, I'll talk. Hey, Kelly, do you want to come on really quick?
Sure. Hi, Jill.
Hi, Kelly.
Hi, everyone. Wendy and Salim, we've met.
Oh yeah, Jill, you didn't meet Kelly, or have you already met?
I'm just meeting her now, and I'm reading her name under her her video.
Yeah, so
we met once at Left Forum, but it was years ago. It was really brief, but it's great to meet all of you, and I've learned so much about this issue. I was like you, Jill. I just assumed it was done. So Wendy, thank you for that in the beginning. Like, I read a little bit about it before we did this, but yeah, very educational. Great job.
So my question, Kelly, was if people in the audience want to come up on the live stream to ask questions, I mean, would it be safe to just...
I would be a little cautious with that. I mean...
No, I know that, because one time I put a Google Meet, like, ask me anything. And yeah, I had some pretty disgusting...
I mean, if you want to do something like that, I think there's a better way to do it, to kind of screen participants a little bit. I mean, it's up to you, but we had an incident years ago. We were doing a candidate town hall for Bill Sombrello, I believe it was, and we ended up with porn on the thing.
Yeah,
so
well,
you
yeah,
might
that's
wanna
what happened
skip
with
that.
mine as well. Yeah. So
Yeah.
okay. So we'll just ask, if the audience has any questions, just to write.
Yeah,
in
I
the
can put
box.
the questions up on the screen.
Okay. So
So-
it looks like Rita has a question though. Go ahead, Rita.
To you, Jill, it's an absolute honor and pleasure to meet you. First and foremost, thank you for everything that you do for not just women's rights, but human rights. And my question is, for those of you who don't know, I'm a huge Swiftie, and she has a song called "The Man," and it's "If I was a man, then I'd be the man." I was personally wondering, in your experience as a candidate, what has been the most challenging barrier being a woman, being a strong woman, and not being afraid to speak out? What hurdles have you faced?
I heard Marianne talking about this a little bit, about kind of the viciousness with which she was attacked. And, I've had my share of that from the start. I first moved from clinical medicine to political medicine, kind of, fighting upstream to our, to address our sick political system that inherently empowers predatory, economic elites and just runs roughshod over societies. So if you challenge power, you're going to get beat up. You are. And you're going to get beat up in every way that you're vulnerable or perceived to be weak. And, that applies to being a woman. It also applies to just being a person-oriented, human being who relates to people, and I've just gotten so used to being beat up in that way. And thankfully, it usually didn't mean being physically beat up, although it has, like the other day when I got arrested at Washington University in St. Louis, just really experiencing the police state and its incredibly violent, heavy hammer of political repression. So yeah, there is a little bit of being physically beat up, but it's mostly being targeted and smear campaigned and dragged into court. And that was really difficult when the fear mongering against my campaign that came out of 2016, which was, I think, very much about the Democrats needing to have a scapegoat for, losing that election. And, they needed to blame someone. And so they tried to frame me as a Russian asset. I was investigated for 3 years by the Senate Intelligence Committee, and cost our campaign a huge amount of money. But that's what they do. That's what they always do. They dragged Ralph Nader into court, into 20 simultaneous court cases when he was running, I think, in 2006. It's part of this just repertoire of dirty tricks that the DNC plays, and I'm, for sure the Republicans have their equivalent. But the Democrats have not been happy at all to have challengers, especially on the issues that resonate with everyday people, whether it's women's rights, our right to health care, our reproductive rights, student debt, the right to free public higher education, which should be a part of any society. No society lives by devouring its young, but that's what our economy is doing right now. There are just so many ways in which the empire and oligarchy does not want to hear an out-of-the-box challenge that is not constrained by corporate funding. So, being part of a grassroots, people-powered political party, we are free to speak to the issues that everyday people, are really hurting on, including war and its impact on our lives, our safety, our security, and our budget. So at any rate, it's that kind of orchestrated, concerted assault by the economic and political elite that required a huge shift in my thinking to be able to live with, because it's a daily thing. It doesn't bother me anymore. It really doesn't get under my skin. And in some ways, I've come to regard it as a badge of honor and a sign that they're really worried about you. Gandhi, from India, had this famous quote that first they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, and then you win. So getting to the point where they're actually viciously attacking you is a really good sign that you are hitting a lot of nerves. So yeah, in short, I'd say that's been kind of maybe the most challenging thing. But I feel like we're in really good company right now, and there are so many of us that are standing up and fighting back in so many different ways. I want to quote a very wise woman here, Alice Walker, who said, among other things, the biggest way people give up power is by not knowing we have it to start with. And it feels to me like we are in a perfect storm right now, where there is just, there's just a tsunami right now of people standing up to demand justice and to really assert our power and to connect across the silos that have been used to divide us in a game of divide and conquer. We are making those connections right now, and pretty unstoppable.
Yep. Well said.
So, yeah. Okay. Well, Kelly and I are going to talk about something, and then we've been trying to bring up Carol. She's a representative from a Feminists in Struggle, feminist group. What is it? Video cam, webcam, whatever isn't working. So we get to see this like eyeball thing. But
do we want to see if her audio, Carol, are you able to speak? I don't think so. I think she's just having connection issues on both audio and video.
Carol, can you say anything? Okay, well, we'll wait until that gets figured out. But Kelly, do you want to come on with me, and we're going to talk a little bit about some of the basically some of the challenges that candidates are having, especially candidates who are actually focusing on things that are important. It seems like obstacles are being thrown in front of us like left and right. So I know that Jill, she is in need of help in New York for her ballot access. So if anyone watching is in New York or near New York, consider helping her if you're a supporter of the ERA or of Jill. Just honestly, just as a independent third party candidate myself, I know how important it is. And I believe we need more of us outsider candidates, because, we're not bought out, etc. So,
she's trying. Carol, are you able to join?
Carol is still trying to get connected.
Wait.
I have an idea for Carol. If Carol gives me her phone number, I'll call her and she can speak through my phone.
Okay, that works. I'll write that really quick. But so yes, if you guys can figure that out, Wendy and Carol get that figured out. But yes, so if you're watching, you're near New York, please help Jill. Go help her petition. I don't know how much else she needs. What do you need there?
We need people to carry petitions. If you're in New York or you're near New York, come and join us, for a day or a weekend or a week. There are only 2 weeks left. New York is the most difficult state of all. We call it the Empire's Last Stand, where they're really trying to keep independent and especially anti-war candidates, grassroots candidates off the ballot. We have to collect 90,000 signatures, and they give a very short time window to do it. And there are only 2 weeks left. So if you can get to New York, basically just get in touch with our campaign at jillstein2024.com. You can go to the website. You can, volunteer or send us a message through the website. Or you can go to the Green Party of New York, their website too. We're both organizing to make this happen. If you are able to make a contribution, that helps us hire more assistants in the field for professional collectors as well. But it's an all hands on deck moment. New York is like the make it or break it. If you're not on the ballot in New York, it's as if you're not on the ballot at all, because to challenge empire and oligarchy and patriarchy, you really have to be on in all states. And we have 75% of the work done. New York is like their last stand to try to keep us off.
Okay, so do you know yet about, do you know Jose Vega? He's running in the Bronx for U.S. House.
The name is familiar.
Okay, so he's an independent. He's running in the Bronx, and he's petitioning right now too. I don't know if there's some way you guys can collaborate, but he has a great, a little indie following, and I mean that might be a way for you to collaborate. I don't know, but that might be an option. So look into him. Kelly knows him. I know him, and he's a really good candidate. And I think, and he's super anti-war too. So you guys would fit in together perfectly. Great. So that might be one avenue outside of, asking the viewers. But yes, people out there watching, please, if you know people in New York, call them, or if you can, contribute, or if you can go, it would mean a lot. Even a day can make a difference. Even an hour, honestly, an hour, 2 hours. So, whatever you can do, please do that, just because, this is really important that we have more choices on the ballot. And, it's really hard for us outsider candidates, especially women candidates. It's like we have to fight so much more. Like, I hate when I see comments on social media like, oh, there are 3 presidential candidates, and it's just like, what about Jill Stein and Marianne Williamson? So it's just like we just get excluded. So yes, if anyone can help her, please help her. And Kelly put me up to asking for a little bit of help tonight too. I am fundraising just a little bit. I picked a number of $275 that will help me. I mean, that would. So if anyone wants to contribute to my cause, I didn't really introduce myself, but I'm a United States House of Representatives candidate in Colorado District 5, which is Colorado Springs. I'm running as an independent candidate, and tomorrow starts my petitioning. And I feel like a wimp because it's nowhere near 90,000 signatures, but it's still a process. And, that's why I'm only asking for, I have a fundraising goal of, $275 to $350. If I can reach that this week, that could really help me with some of my, buying lunches for volunteer signers, or, just printing costs, notary costs. So if anyone wants to contribute to my cause, I would appreciate it. You can find my PayPal link at my website, catforhouse.com, which is on the screen there. So I don't know if you wanted to say anything, Kelly.
I did. I just wanted to say, I think one other time we talked about fundraising, and I kind of said, I just don't involve money, just on principle. I never have in my activism work, and I like it that way because I feel money corrupts. But when Kat started telling me about, and I know about all the barriers that are there for independent and third-party candidates, all the signatures you have to gather, and then you have to gather like twice as many. I watched, saw what happened with Matt Ho here in North Carolina, and they instantly trash half your signatures. So when she was telling me about all this and having to get the notary to sign it, to stamp it every 30 signatures, had to be on this specific paper, and she's running back and forth all day, and the printing costs. And I thought, I think a lot of people are struggling right now. It's the inflation, and it's hard to get people to donate. But I think when people know specifically what it's going for, and that how much that would help, and you could see like, hey, if I pitch in $5, Kat can go print out more pages and get signatures and get, and make this happen. So it's kind of odd that I encouraged her to do it, but I did. So if you can, please donate. Kat's been on our Candidates for Assange broadcast a couple of times, and she's great. I've gotten to know her, and I want to see more third party and independent candidates have a real shot. So that's all.
Thank you. Yeah. So blame Kelly. She put me up to it. I wasn't going to ask for any money, but she said, you have to do this. So I wanted to make it fair too. And, get, obviously Jill has a bigger task ahead of her than I do, but, if anyone can help in any way, it's super important. You unmuted yourself.
It's so weird how women feel bad about asking for money. Men are like, just give me some money. So women are like, I'm sorry, I have to ask for $20.
That's an interesting point. Yeah.
It's so bad. And
Yeah.
Carol is on the phone. Can I put her on?
Yeah,
Sure,
so
yeah.
yes, Carol, introduce yourself.
I'll put you on solo here so we can.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Carol, you're up. So you can introduce yourself and ask a question now.
Okay. I'm Sarah. Well, I'm Carol Bolden. I'm a Green Party member. I'm a member of and the co-chair of the Green Alliance for Sex-Based Rights, which is a group organized around the sex-based rights for women. We have been working in conjunction with Wendy for a while on the Equal Rights Amendment. We feel that women have, the need for constitutional rights in the actual federal Constitution because we're actual human beings. And it's an atrocity that, 52% of the population is still, second class, we're second class citizens. And I'm also a member of Feminists in Struggle, which I co-founded with Ann Menashe, who's another Green Party member. And, that is also based on the rights for women, the sex-based rights. And I wanted to make people aware that there is you can go to either one of them on the website, the Green Alliance for Sex-Based Rights is greenalliance.sexbasedrights.org. And Feminist in Struggle is feministstruggle.org. And Feminist in Struggle is having a conference in July, and it's right there on the homepage. You'll see it. You can sign up for that. It's for women only. And because we are very much in support of women and the right to our own safe spaces. And that would include, as I wrote in the chat earlier, that, we need safe spaces, not only for sports, as was mentioned earlier by, I think, Marianne Williamson, but also for, locker rooms and also, other kinds of private spaces for our own dignity, privacy, and safety, and also for prisons and domestic violence shelters. So that's one of the huge issues for us. But all of this is subsumed under the Equal Rights Amendment because we don't have that. We don't have rights, as Wendy has so well pointed out. We don't have really any rights in this country. As old Scalia, schooled us on several years ago, 2011, the Constitution does not prohibit discrimination against women. So this is why we have to have the Equal Rights Amendment, and we're working in conjunction with Wendy and Equal Means Equal to bring this about. And we're really glad to hear Jill Stein come on and make the pledge that she will insist on telling the office on the first day in office to publish the Equal Rights Amendment. Yay. In the meantime, we've got to put pressure on old Joe Biden to do his job and get this done. So I don't know if there's anything else I really need to add right now. I'm just so glad that you're having this great panel discussion, and I'm really appreciative of everyone on here. So thank you very much.
Okay, Carol, thank you. I'm going to hang up.
Okay.
Right. Maybe, Kat, we should put some of that information under your YouTube page or somewhere so people have a way to. It was a little hard to hear everything, so I think we got most of it, but
Did you want to say something, Wendy?
Just Feminists in Struggle is pretty easy to find. FIST is their acronym.
Okay, I'll put it in here in the chat.
Okay. Yeah, did you have anything to say? I know it was kind of hard to hear her, but I think it ended on a positive note. I mean, she's not angry with any of us, so that's a good thing.
She's not shy.
Yeah, no, she's great. We've been messaging each other, and she was very insistent on learning whether or not Jill would, make the public statement that she would publish it on the first day, day one. So you've said, that doesn't seem like a problem. So no problem there, no problem with the feminists. So it's all good.
Yeah, the thing that didn't surprise me, Kat, when I read some of the stuff you sent me before this panel was that that Biden and Kamala Harris had, they're campaigning on it and they're raising money on it, but then they're fighting you in the courts. Like I wasn't surprised at all by that, but it's unfortunate to hear that. So good to call it out. I like how Wendy means business.
It was heartbreaking. It was heartbreaking, but as I wrote in my piece that I have mentioned now a couple of times, it's coming out this month. This is a scholarly, peer-reviewed piece on the history of women's struggle for the ERA. I say, because it's true, that it was really important for women to be betrayed by Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, because it was the fuel that for sure will reunite us in the same way that we've been united in the past over, certain things and certain periods of time. When we get divided, and then something happens like this where you get an eye opener and you have no choice. It's time to go back to united. And women haven't been united for a very long time. The National Women's Party brought us together. Alice Paul was fiercely nonpartisan. She was very good at saying to both parties, don't you dare tell me what you're going to do for women. I'll tell you what you're going to do for women. Because they were always pitching her, we're going to do this and we're going to do that. And she would say, I don't care what you say. You sit down and listen to me. I'll tell you what women want. We want the vote. We want equality. And she was fearless and she was so powerful because she was nonpartisan. She was so fearless and powerful because she never, ever, ever got captured by either side. And that's why she had to be destroyed. And I don't mean destroyed personally, like she was marginalized. She was shoved off into a corner. And then I don't know if anybody even knows this. This is probably going to be my next piece if I ever get around to the time necessary to do it. But the Women's Party was destroyed from inside. It was like rotted from inside. A group, the Women's Party was started way back in 1916, and it was always getting more and more powerful because we got the vote. Then we were, literally going toward equality with all guns blaring. Forget that war reference. And then the Women's Party had to be destroyed from within, and it was basically replaced with the National Organization for Women, which people don't know this, but at their first national convention, they came out, which was in 1966, they came out against the ERA at a time when the ERA was at the top of the concerns of women, and it was really going really fast to Congress, and they came out against us. They came out against the ERA, which helped give Congress the political power the political flexibility it needed to add the deadline. I mean, had now not been established, I don't think they ever would have gotten away with tacking on that deadline, which everyone now knows, was successful in basically killing the ERA. But then the National Women's Party was so powerful still, because Alice was still such a force, though she was quite a bit older. Then these, frauds, if you will, interjected themselves into the National Women's Party, created factions within it. They became divided. The bad guys sued the good guys, and the party was dissolved as part of the settlement in the lawsuit. No, you're going to faint. No, you're going to be surprised when you hear this. The National Women's Party was dissolved in a quid pro quo deal with the government. The government said, we will let you keep the National Women's Party's headquarters in Washington, D.C. as a museum if you agree to give up the Women's Party and never have a Women's Party ever again. And the deal was struck. The bad guys had taken over by then. They agreed to the deal. The National Women's Party dissolved, and now the Women's Party's house in DC is considered a museum, as if we were done and we only need the museum to look back now. And it became final. The dissolution became final in 2021, and no one even noticed. This is what happens to women. We become divided by external forces. God forbid we have our own party. And yet now we know, because enough time has passed, that the only reason we won the vote when we did was the National Women's Party. It was formed in 1916. We won the vote in 1920. That was no accident. We hadn't won it for decades before that. But once we had our own party, we won the vote. The same thing is going to happen with the ERA. Now that women know neither of the major political parties supports us, we have no choice but to do what Alice Paul did, come back together. And I don't care what we call ourselves. We can call ourselves the National Union for Women's Equality. We can call ourselves bologna and cheese sandwich. I don't care. What matters is that we come together over this single issue. And like Alice Paul did, we fight only for this issue, one issue, and then get that. Once that's done, everything else we care about will get better because our voices will be louder. That's why we need the ERA. And it's why we need to be fiercely nonpartisan until we get it.
Hey, Wendy, yeah, I was going to say this anyway. It's super late where Jill is. It's probably late where you all are. It's about 9 o'clock where I am, but Jill needs to get off soon. So Jill, thank you so much for coming on. It was really inspiring speaking with you, and I am looking forward to, hopefully putting monthly discussions together, and we'll work around whatever, scheduling conflicts you have, and hopefully bring Marianne on as well. But did you have any closing comments? Thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, I mean, just thank you all. You've all been so inspiring to hear about the work you've all been doing and to see the different kind of dimensions of this movement. And it just feels like this is such an oversight, that the ERA didn't get passed. And it just feels like we're really close to making this happen. And it's been wonderful to connect with everybody. And I really hope we keep building on this and let's make it happen.
We're going to make it happen. I have a feeling this is going to be the year. And, like Wendy said, we can call ourselves bologna and cheese sandwich, but we're the new women's party. Okay. So, but thank you so much. I hope you get some good rest, and, hopefully our advocacy is going to help you get some more New Yorkers. I'll reach out to Jose Vega, but your campaign should probably reach out to him as well. But yeah, thank you so much. Have a great night.
Thank you, Katrina. Thank you for everything.
Yeah, great to meet you all.
Thank you. Take care.
Before we go off, though, I want to say something. But I mean, Jill, you can go. Okay.
Yeah, I'm ending the stream.